This hidden village is called Aogashima. It's located right in the middle of a volcanic crater. You can find it to the south of Japan, in northernmost Micronesia. The story goes that a volcano erupted in the Philippine Sea in the 1780s, causing a lot of harm to a nearby community. Half of the population managed to escape the massive eruption and came back years later to rebuild their village. At the moment, about 160 people are living there peacefully, even though the volcano is still considered to be active. Huacachina in Peru lies in one of the driest climates in the world, and still, it's a beautiful town, surrounded by lush palm trees. It also has a lagoon, which is said to have special healing properties. The settlement has a little over 90 residents that manage small businesses. Most of them use sand as their primary resource. Some offer sandboarding services or even provide luxury dinners in the desert. For over 500 years, a small group of people has been living on a cliffside of a peak called the Green Mountain. It's one of the most remote places in Oman and in the whole world. The only way to reach the settlement is on foot, by mule, or by all-terrain vehicle. It's called Al-Sogara, and you need to hike around 20 minutes up a steep stone staircase to get there. The village appeared back when the locals chiseled their houses into the mountain stone to protect themselves from storms and the cold. 5 families of the Al-Sharaki tribe still call this place home, about 25 people in total. A lot of other villages like this one can be found in the region, but Al-Sogara is special because it's the only one that is still inhabited. Up until 14 years ago, there wasn't even electricity or telephone lines here. The nearest road you could drive on was 9 miles away. Since there were no schools, people had to learn how to read and write at home from their elders. To this day, the villagers continue their traditional practice of building their homes by carving them directly into the mountain rock. One of the most beautiful Greek gems is Monemvasia, a castle town located in southeastern Peloponnese. It was designed to be invisible from the mainland for added protection. You can only see it from the sea, and to reach it, you need to follow a narrow pathway that connects it to the mainland. That's actually how its name came into being. It translates to a single passage. Monemvasia was built in the Middle Ages, exclusively carved in the mountain rock. These days, a lot of old mansions have been turned into guest houses and boutique hotels. Not only is the architecture amazing and beautifully preserved, but it's also surrounded by crystal clear waters. A town with no roads? Pack your bags for Giethoorn in the Netherlands, if you don't mind traveling by boat. The town is very peaceful, probably because everyone here travels by canals. Even the mail gets delivered by water. Since there's no car traffic and people rarely move around, the town is really quiet. So quiet that the loudest sound one can hear is the quacking of a duck every now and then. It initially started as a movie set, but Hobbiton in New Zealand still exists, even after the filming of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit was finished. Tours to the charming set town are now available. There are 44 Hobbit holes in total, though only a few of them are actually open to the public. The isolated cliffside village of Gasadalar in the Faroe Islands has a population of only 11 people. It's mostly known for its scenic waterfall, which falls directly into the Atlantic Ocean. You could only reach it on foot, hiking through the mountains not so long ago. However, a tunnel has been constructed recently, making the place easily accessible by car. The 1980s musical Popeye had a custom set built on Malta. It wasn't taken down after the filming had been finished, and Popeye Village is now home to groups of beautifully colored wooden buildings and a company of actors. There's a lot of fun stuff to do there, like watch theater shows, go on boat rides, visit museums, or simply explore the creative village. The oldest and most photographed village in Austria is called Hallstatt. It's a hidden European gem with beautifully preserved old buildings and a subterranean salt lake. It's also home to a museum with artifacts as old as 7,000 years and the world's oldest salt mine. Fort Bourtange in the Netherlands is a small establishment shaped like a star. Creative parts aside, it was built this way for defensive purposes. It gave the guards of the fort a strategic advantage because they had a perfect 360-degree view. These days, the construction is perfectly preserved, including its old buildings, cobblestone streets, wooden windmills, and sophisticated bridges. In Morocco, there's a traditional earthen village made entirely from clay bricks. You can find it in a valley close to the Atlas Mountains, 32 miles from the capital of Morocco. Merchants who followed the trans-Saharan trade route went through this town, carrying spices and gold. As the trade route became less and less popular, many of these fortresses were abandoned and are now preserved relics. It's one of the best places for skiing in the world, but it's still hidden from the public. No wonder the locals call it the secret side of the valley. Located in Austria, the tiny village of Varth has only a couple hundred inhabitants. Not only is it the snowiest village on Earth, but it also has access to one of the biggest ski slopes in the world. Its popularity increased a bit in 2013 when the construction of a high-speed road was completed nearby. Pirano in Italy is one of the most colorful islands in the world. Because of its vibrant colors, it almost looks tropical. It features emerald green waters, beautiful houses, and a 17th century bell tower. Its lace-making tradition brought Leonardo da Vinci to the island back in the 1400s. He bought a piece of cloth there and later used it for the design of the famous Dome of Milan. If you have a UK passport, you must be familiar with the beautiful small town of Bibury, as its scenery is featured in your ID. It's surely one of the most charming towns in Europe, as it's made up of stone buildings standing on the River Colne. The image in the UK passports is that of Arlington Row, a line of weavers' cottages that date back to the 14th century. The town of Coober Pedy in Australia is partially underground. It all began back in 1915, when opal deposits were found in the area. To this day, the town is still the biggest opal mine in the world. People living there figured out that it would be more comfortable for them to stick to the underground, as the temperatures outside can reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So, the settlement now has underground stores and galleries. Coober Pedy is also home to the world's first 4-star underground hotel. To visit the most remote location in the whole world, you'll need to prepare yourself for quite a journey. If you're traveling from the United States, for example, the easiest route is a 15-hour-long flight to Cape Town, South Africa, followed by a 6-day boat ride. Only after that will you reach Tristan da Cunha. Or you can take a month-long cruise across the South Atlantic Ocean, whatever works better for you. Planning in advance is a must, since there are only 9 boat trips to the island yearly. The island itself is just 7 miles long. Sitting right in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, it covers a mere 37.8 square miles. The 300 residents are all farmers. They have the internet, but it's really slow. As for a phone network or a local newspaper, neither is available. The inhabitants of the island speak a dialect of English that is used by the smallest number of people in the world.
All right, so let's start our journey with one of the most famous and scary vanished villages. It's located in India, the district of Rajasthan. This is Kuldara village. Unlike other abandoned places, this one is difficult to get to because the locals won't want to take you there. People are afraid of this place and try to avoid it. You can't get a taxi and drop off near this spot. The driver will tell you where to go. You won't find any traces of civilization nearby. The village is located in a hot desert area, but when you get close to it, you'll feel an unpleasant chill down your back. You won't find any vegetation because of the heat. There are only ruins of buildings and sand-covered roads. It seems as if you're walking through the excavations of an ancient city. But Kuldara is not so old. It only vanished in 1825. Before this time, the village had been thriving. It was almost a town consisting of many small settlements united into communities. Residents were busy with agriculture there. Plus, they went mining and extracted valuable gypsum rocks and minerals. But suddenly, everything changed overnight. For some unknown reason, people abandoned their homes and ran away. No one knows why, and no one has ever seen the residents again. Locals living in the nearest areas are sure that this place is cursed, so they never come close to it. They think this is the center of power from the other world. Some people feel sick here, others claim to see phantoms, and still others experience irrational fear. But tourists like to go there. The simplest and least scary vision says that people left the village because of the lack of water. Still, this version seems weird. If there had been a lack of water, people would have planned the change of location instead of running away in a hurry. The second version is way more mystical. There's a legend that one cruel ruler collected large taxes from this community. He fell in love with the daughter of the Kuldara chief and threatened that he would collect higher taxes if the girl refused to marry him. He gave her 1 day to make a decision. None of the residents agreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village. Those who don't believe in all these rumors can spend a night in a tent there. Chances are you'll hear someone screaming or feel someone walking and knocking on your tent. Nah, just kidding. Our next village is in the U.S., in the state of Pennsylvania. More precisely, it's not even a village, but a borough called Centralia. This place looks totally lifeless. Burnt trees, dried grass, empty buildings. Almost all the roads here have huge cracks. People sprinkle them with gravel to decrease the amount of thick smoke that's pouring from the ground all the time. This abandoned place has been burning for more than 50 years. No wonder this place reminds of something. The authors of the horror game Silent Hill got inspiration from this town. Centralia was a mining town with shops, cafes, libraries, and happy residents. People worked in the mines to get anthracite coal. They used one of the underground tunnels as a landfill for garbage. And then, in 1962, according to the popular version, they decided to get rid of garbage by burning it. The plan failed. As soon as the garbage caught fire, it spread throughout the mine. Then, all mining work in the town stopped because of the increased level of carbon dioxide. Residents didn't manage to extinguish the fire, and it started to spread underground throughout the whole city. Roads began to heat up. The soil became poisonous. Thick smoke slowly filled the streets. People were evacuated from this place. By 1992, Centralia was completely abandoned. The town looks ominous, and some people believe it's not just because of the fire. They believe not all people managed to evacuate, and their phantoms are still walking through the burning streets, waiting for someone to finally put an end to this eternal fire. Just imagine a prosperous, beautiful village where people do agriculture on fertile land and bake delicious bread. And then, bang! Everything disappears. There were only traces on the ground and a couple of bricks left from beautiful stone houses, mills, and chapels. Huge fertile fields became abandoned, and no one knows why. Well, welcome to the English village of Gainsthorpe in Lincolnshire, or rather what's left of it. From above, you'll see earthen ramparts on a grassy field, the outlines of roads, sunken hollows, and barely distinguishable contours of the walls of houses and barns. If you come here, you may not even notice the traces of the village. It's just an unusual green field. But in the 17th century, life was thriving here. Let's try to solve this mystery. The first mention of this place dates back to 1086. I wasn't around then. Since that time, it was prospering. There were about 19 fertile fields, a chapel, a mill, a bridge, and a manor house where the lords lived. In total, there were about 25 buildings. From the records dating to the 16th century, you can find that quarries appeared in the village. That is, this place not only got wealthy, but also kept pace with progress. Then, by 1616, the village had become completely abandoned. Scientists are still looking for an answer to this question. Some believe that something terrible and mystical happened to the village. One of the main hypotheses explaining what happened is the plague. Another version is that Gainsthorpe still couldn't catch up with progress. In the 17th century, there was a transition from rural to urban life. Industrialization had begun. Many young people left their native villages to search for a better life. Some believe that groups of robbers and thieves settled in the village. They turned Gainsthorpe into their base and eventually plundered it all. The exact reason is still unknown, but the good news is that, theoretically, the village can be returned. Specialists can reconstruct the ruins and recreate agriculture. The hardest part, though, is to find funding. A similar fate befell the small village of Achill Island in Ireland. About 40 simple houses made of clay and straw were located along the valley washed by Keem Bay, and it was just a fantastic place to live. Coast, mountains, crystal clear water, and rich soil. The village was founded in 1838. Now, there are several mounds of ground and small pieces of walls left of it. Locals living in neighboring settlements don't remember this village. Or maybe they know something, but don't want to say anything to anybody. Only travel writers described it in their diaries as a place of serene beauty. Now, many towns nearby still exist, but why did this one disappear? An inexplicable phenomenon that sweeps entire villages off the face of the earth? An unknown, mystical, scary force? If there is nothing fantastic about this village's disappearance, then why don't people build any new houses here? Perhaps they're afraid of something. So, the local archaeological school students decided to find the answer to this question. They started excavating the village in search of clues. They found out that some kind of trouble happened to this place in the middle of the 19th century, but it's not known exactly what. At that time, a terrible period of famine came. Perhaps people simply left their homeland to find food elsewhere. Anyway, work on excavation continues, and the students intend to uncover the truth. In the 20th century, more and more villages became abandoned all over the world. The main reason is the relocation of residents. Young people don't want to live away from the modern world, but older adults can't leave their native place, so they stay there as the last residents, and then, several years later, when they have bought the farm, so to speak, villages get abandoned. Another problem is access to medicine. In some places, people have to drive tens and hundreds of miles to the nearest doctor. But many villages are still thriving. Some towns receive more funding and have developed agricultural businesses. Besides, not everyone likes city life. Often city administrations specifically distribute free land to people in rural areas so that they can build houses there. The Amazon River, the boat, and dense jungle on both sides. All is silent. Only the engine is revving, and you look around nervously under the earnest gaze of the Peruvian guide. Suddenly, the man smiles and points ahead. This is it. You've finally arrived at Iquitos. The city is hidden deep within the Amazon rainforest. On one side, Iquitos is surrounded by water, and on the other lies thick, impenetrable rainforest as far as the eye can see, making this city extremely difficult to reach. First, you had to fly to Peru's capital, Lima, a vibrant coastal city. From there, you traveled by bus through Peru's vast jagged mountains before being plunged into the heart of the Amazon rainforest. 3 days into this bus journey, you reached a small town where the road suddenly stopped. At over 140 square miles, Iquitos is the largest continental city in the world that cannot be reached by road. You're still over 200 miles away from Iquitos, so from here you take a boat ride along the hot, humid Amazon River before finally reaching the remote city 5 days after you left Lima. When you arrive in the city, you notice many of the houses are built on tall stilts. This is because, in the springtime, the river surrounding Iquitos swells up, submerging parts of the city in water. For this, Iquitos has been nicknamed the Venice of the Amazon. The stilted houses are tall enough to avoid the murky waters of the Amazon River. You hear loud buzzing coming from all around the city. It sounds like a gang of bikers have arrived. In reality, these are motocarrios. There are very few cars in Iquitos. Instead, they have motorcycles with small passenger cabins attached to them. There are around 45,000 of these things whizzing around Iquitos, making the city very noisy. Your trip to the most isolated places has just begun. So you head to Norway and arrive in the capital city Oslo. Immediately, you hop on another plane. After a 3-hour flight, you land at the world's northernmost public airport, Longyearbyen. You step off the plane to see a small and colorful town enclosed by snow-topped mountains. There's no settlement further to the north than this. Longyearbyen translates to the Long Year Town, named after its American founder, coal miner John Longyear. You take a walk along the coast of the small town. The water is a beautiful crystal blue. You decide to dip your toe in to test it out. Ow! Bad idea. The average temperature of the water here is 32 degrees, making it ice cold. In the distance, you can make out a fuzzy white creature. It's a polar bear. In fact, it's a group of them. In Longyearbyen, polar bears famously outnumber humans. Around 3,000 of these animals populate the area compared to the human population of 2,300. Finally, the sun sets. You grab a blanket and sit back to take in the stunning view of the northern lights. Now, imagine you're walking in the scorching heat across Egypt's Great Sand Sea. You've been walking for miles, hours, days even, dreaming of water, greenery, and a place to rest, when suddenly you come across a small settlement with olive groves, palm trees, and even freshwater springs. This isn't a heat-induced mirage. It's the Siwa Oasis, an Egyptian city of 23,000 people and a miracle of nature. You travel here by flying to Egypt's capital, Cairo, and then embarking on a lengthy and desolate bus ride across the desert. When you finally spot some greenery amongst the sand, you have reached the Siwa Oasis. After refreshing yourself in the cool waters of the springs, you explore the city further and come across ancient ruins. This city has existed since 10,000 BCE, and many historical remnants can still be found there today. Amongst these ruins, you notice there are newer buildings. These are where the modern-day Siwi people live. You spend some time with the Siwi, a friendly and unique community of Egyptians. They tell you all about their city. The Siwa Oasis is located in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and due to its harsh climate, it's one of the most remote cities in the world. You notice how dry the air is and how scorching the sun feels. Reaching highs of 118 degrees Fahrenheit, this heat makes the Siwa Oasis a difficult place to live. It's time to travel to a more balanced climate. You head northeast and arrive in Russia's capital, Moscow. From there, you take a flight east again, traveling further and further across Russia until you're closer to Alaska than to Moscow. You've reached the city of Petropavlovsk, which translates to City of Peter and Paul. The first thing you see are giant mountains surrounding the city, cutting it off from the rest of the world. These mountains are in fact volcanoes. In this far eastern part of Russia, there are more than 300 volcanoes, including 29 active ones. These volcanoes stop any roads from reaching Petropavlovsk. The city depends on flights and boats to import supplies. You turn away from the volcanoes to stare out at the blue, shimmering ocean. The water looks nice, so you head down to the beach where a crowd of sea lions are sunbathing along the sand. Petropavlovsk is home to incredibly diverse wildlife. Just off the shore, you can see a whale fin poking out of the water. You explore the city's diverse landscape. You go to one of the city's ski resorts and spend the day on the slopes. Then you hike up a rocky path to the base of one of the city's many volcanoes. Finally, it's time to relax on a boat tour around the island to see the city's famous Three Brothers rock formation. Feeling inspired, you travel to another volcanic land, Chile's Easter Island. The island doesn't have a harbor and only one airline flies to the remote land, so you travel an entire day to Santiago, Chile. Then you climb aboard a small plane to fly to Easter Island. You walk among the high cliffs of the barren island and come across its famous monuments. These are giant, mysterious statues of human heads. They're called moai and were carved by the local people around 800 years ago. You inspect the earth beneath your feet. It looks and feels very dry. Easter Island consists of 3 ancient volcanoes. The volcanic soil makes it very difficult to grow crops or vegetation. Some of the city's trees were cleared hundreds of years ago to make way for the stone monuments, giving the island the empty look it has today. You embark on a boat ride 1,100 miles west from Easter Island. You reach a small green land floating in the Pacific Ocean. This is Pitcairn Island. You might recall that this place played a major role in the mutiny on the Bounty. You come down from the boat and begin your journey to reach Adamstown, the center of the island where its 43 inhabitants live. To reach Adamstown, you hike the Hill of Difficulty, a steep and rocky 200-foot climb to the top of the island. Now that you've finally made it here, you can explore the diverse and unique nature of the land. Pitcairn Island is home to the largest marine reserve in the world. You take a snorkeling trip and swim alongside all kinds of exotic fish. You explore vibrant coral reefs and even catch sight of a rare humpback whale. Dreaming of the great days of the old Wild West, you decide to travel to Supai, Arizona. To get to this Native American settlement and fragment of the past, you drive along America's famous Route 66. You stop, seemingly in the middle of nowhere with only desert land as far as the eye can see. Then you follow an 8-mile walking trail to reach Supai. You hike down into the Grand Canyon, almost 3,000 feet deep. You come across a stunning waterfall spilling over the cliffs of the canyon. This is Havasu Falls, a popular tourist spot famous for its vivid blue-green water. After a further mile's hike, you finally reach Supai. Over 200 members of the Havasupai Indian tribe reside in the small town. It's often referred to as the most remote town in the United States. To your left, you see several mules making their way across town with packages on their backs. Because no roads lead to this small settlement, mail is delivered by a mule train. Without it, it would take the average mail carrier a 16-hour hike to complete this route. You walk around the area and come across many more towering blue waterfalls. The untouched nature and great views of the Grand Canyon make the long hike worthwhile. After a beautiful sunset, nighttime falls, and there are no lights for miles. The land is lit up by the countless stars shining overhead.
There's one beautiful mountain in the southern part of Tibet called Kailash. Its height is about 22,000 feet. This is not so high and much less than Mount Everest. But unlike Everest, almost no one has ever climbed Kailash for one unusual reason. In 1926, one famous British climber decided to get to the mountain's top and studied it for a long time. The Mountaineering Association informed him that the mountain was completely inaccessible. Despite this, he continued trying. While exploring its northern part, it started snowing at that moment. It was impossible to work in such conditions, so he gave up this idea and left. The next attempt to climb to the top of Kailash was made by another climber, Colonel Wilson. Together with his companion, they figured out the most suitable passage to the top. They were confident they would achieve their goal, but the harsh winter ruined their plan. The colonel wanted to come back again, but he never did. Another person who wanted to climb to the top was an Australian writer and climber. He explored the territory of the Tibetan mountains and saw Kailash. At that moment, he thought he would easily reach the peak. He met one local lama and asked him if it was possible to climb Kailash. Lama replied that only an innocent person, free from any sin, can get there. And this person didn't even need to climb the icy walls, as he would be able to fly up there like a bird. The writer didn't really understand what the Lama meant, but for some reason, abandoned his idea. Then in the 80s, the Mountaineering Association again considered the issue of Mount Kailash. They decided to allow conquering the peak to Reinhold Messner, an Italian researcher who was one of the first to make a solo ascent of Everest. When he heard the offer to climb Kailash, he refused to conduct an expedition. He said, "If we conquer this mountain, then we conquer something in people's souls." The climber knew that this mountain was a sacred place for local Tibetans. Pilgrims from all over the world came to its foot. Reinhold Messner knew this and didn't want to do something that could offend other people. No one is allowed to climb to the top of this mountain, but you can go to its foot to feel the energy and enjoy the beautiful view. Put a photo of the Rainbow Mountains and a canvas with a painted landscape next. It will be difficult to distinguish the drawing from reality. These mountains look like paintings. This is a real art of nature. Rainbow Mountains, located in one of the geological parks of China, shimmer with almost all the colors of the rainbow. The rocks seem to be covered with glass and reflect sunlight. This place got these colors thanks to the sandstone and minerals. These substances have been pressed for 25 million years and have made Rainbow Mountains one of the most beautiful places on Earth. We are in the Philippines. There are more than 1,000 unusual hills spread over a vast area. No, this is not a photo of chocolates. This is chocolate hills. They're small. The height of the largest reaches about 400 feet. You can quickly climb to the top in a few minutes. The peculiarity of these hills is that hundreds of thousands of people daily sprinkle these peaks with millions of tons of chocolate chips. And then, when it melts, the incredible smell of cocoa spreads throughout the territory. Okay, just kidding. Of course it's not chocolate chips. Every hill is covered with green grass. During the dry season, it dries out and gets a chocolate brown hue. This landscape is just a great photo for a package of sweets. Perhaps some company has already printed it on its box. Imagine a small mountain, about 33 feet high and 330 feet wide. It's not even a mountain, but a small hill. Nothing grows on it. No grass, no trees, just dark sand. But the peculiarity of this mountain is that it can move. Every year, it passes a distance of about 66 feet. Look at it, remember its position, and come back in 12 months. It will change the location, but also change its shape. Moving Mountain is located in the savannah of Tanzania. This massive dune has been moving in different directions for 3 million years. In fact, it doesn't consist of sand, but of magnetized volcanic ash. Once upon a time, a volcano erupted here. The settled ash formed these hills. If you take a handful of this ash and throw it into the air, it will be attracted to the total mass of the dune. A strong wind makes them move, but magnetic forces keep the sand together. One day, the mountain split into two parts and went in different directions. One of the most mysterious and strange mountains is located in North Carolina. This is Mount Brown. Externally, you won't find anything special in it, but try to take a tent and spend a couple nights there. Perhaps you will remember these nights for the rest of your life. People have often seen mysterious lights flying around this mountain. These strange fireballs fly high speeds over the top and disappear into the evening sky. Sometimes they disappear, appear, and disappear again. At first, people thought this was the result of ignited evaporating nitrogen, but this theory was refuted. Then, someone said that the balls were the light from the locomotive's headlights, but after the railway was flooded and the train stopped working, people continued to see the lights. There were reports of white, yellow, orange, and blue lights. Many are sure that they are optical illusions. One physics professor decided to check the validity of this version. He spent several years in this region, next to the mountain. Almost every day he filmed the rock, and one day he managed to catch these strange objects. In July 2016, he recorded Brown Mountain with 2 cameras from different angles, and both filmed a flying fireball. If it were an optical illusion or glare on lenses, then one of the cameras wouldn't have captured this phenomenon. This proves that the balls are real, but their nature is still unknown. One of the men claimed he had touched the flying ball when it was flying on the highway. The man said he felt an electric current. Now this place attracts thousands of tourists from all over the world. Fans of strange and unexplained phenomena like to come here. This mountain looks pretty scary and lifeless. It's located on a small volcanic island in the Tasman Sea, Australia. The island is called Ball's Pyramid. The sharp mountain range on this land has a triangular shape and a height of 1,800 feet. This is almost twice the size of the Eiffel Tower. It seems like some evil mad scientist or vampire lives on the top. Being on the island and climbing the cliff is dangerous because of the slippery, rocky surface. Sailors discovered this place in 1788. They thought the island was uninhabited and didn't want to explore it. Then, after more than 200 years, people still wanted to explore it. This place was considered lifeless for a long time, but scientists found unusual inhabitants there in 2001. They were climbing the mountain and found a strange bush at the height of about 100 feet. Something was stirring inside it. Scientists pushed aside the branches and saw a colony of big insects, land lobsters or walking sausages. These little guys are from the family of stick insects. They do look like sausages. Each of them is about 6 inches and has 6 tenacious paws and has a solid brown shell. On that day, scientists saw 27 insects. The most exciting thing is that people believed land lobsters were extinct at the beginning of the 20th century. How did they end up on this mountain? And how did they manage to survive in this remote, lifeless place? No one knows.
Only true adventure enthusiasts and experts dare to climb the K2 mountain, and even for them, returning safely is not a given. You can find this peak in the middle of the Karakoram mountain range in northern Pakistan. It was the second one measured during a survey in 1856. That's why it's got a weird name. K2 Mountain is 28,000 feet above sea level. This makes it the second highest mountain on Earth, right after Mount Everest. It's also among the most dangerous places. Out of the top 5 highest mountains globally, K2 is the most dangerous, claiming 1 life for every 4 people who reach the top. Avalanches, crazy storms, and tricky slopes make K2 the toughest mountain to climb on the planet. The air is thin. Only 1/3 of the oxygen you can find at sea level is up there on the K2 summit. Storms can last for days, causing lots of trouble. K2 might be a tad shorter than Mount Everest, but it's way harder to climb because of its terrain. Everest has some flat stretches, but K2 is steep almost all the way up. At 24,000 feet, it flattens out a little, but rockfalls and unpredictable weather make this area a real risk zone. Everest might be taller, but K2 is considered more lethal. Everest has a couple of popular routes, like the South Col and the North Ridge. K2, on the other hand, doesn't believe in easy routes. Even the supposedly simple one is steep as heck, averaging 45 degrees from base to summit. While Everest has spots where climbers can chill out, K2 doesn't play that game. Campsites on K2 are tiny compared to those on Everest, and things get wild as you climb higher. On Everest, climbers might sometimes ditch their helmets, especially on less intense sections. But on K2, you better keep that helmet on from the get-go. Rocks are falling, avalanches are happening, safety first. Rescues are a whole different story on K2. The rocky terrain makes it tough to bring down an injured climber. Helicopters aren't readily available, and even if you get one, it's going to cost you a pretty penny. Everest is a bit friendlier in that department. These Nepalese climbers are a big deal on Everest, but not so much on K2. Sherpas are like the superheroes of Everest, helping climbers speed up the ascent. On K2, it's a bit more of a solo mission. Now, let's talk about danger zones. The Khumbu icefall on Everest is gnarly, but K2's bottleneck takes the cake. It's higher, which makes it way riskier. And here's the kicker. There have been years when nobody has reached K2's summit. That's not a thing on Everest. Success rates on Everest are a lot higher. The first attempt to reach the summit was made in 1902 by a team of climbers, but they only got to 21,400 feet. Only in 1954 did an Italian crew with a Pakistani buddy in tow finally conquer K2. That was no easy feat. By August 2022, only around 700 people had reached the top. At least 91 people have lost their lives trying to conquer the peak. Moving on to other extreme places on Earth, like Ethiopia's Danakil Depression. At first glance, it looks like another planet, for example, Mars. Its landscape is a mix of burning salt, volcanic rock, and sulfuric acid, all in shades of yellow and orange. There are springs with bad vibes around the Dalo volcano, one of the many volcanoes in the area. Scientists have recently examined samples from these pools, hoping to find signs of life. But no luck. The DNA levels in these springs are basically non-existent. This makes the Danakil Depression one of the least friendly places for life on our planet. The next extreme zone is Death Valley, California. It's among the hottest spots on our planet. You can cook eggs on the ground there. The highest temperature ever recorded by a weather station in that area was 134 degrees Fahrenheit in 1913. Keep in mind that there's an even hotter ground spot on our planet. It's in the Dashilut Desert in Iran. A NASA satellite measured a temperature of 159 degrees Fahrenheit there in 2005. It's so blazing hot that birds flying through that area sometimes drop from the sky because they can't handle the intense heat. So let's switch from heat to humidity, because we're going to a village called Mausanram in India. This place is the rain champion of the world. It's got so much rain in a year that if you put Rio de Janeiro's Christ the Redeemer, that huge 98-foot-tall statue there, it would be standing in knee-deep water. This village is in the Kashi Hills. It has 467 inches of rainfall every year. That's like stacking 39 standard cereal boxes, one on top of the other, over the course of a year. Our next one is La Oroya. Living in this city in central Peru is really tough for the 25,000 people calling this place home. The air is filled with dangerous stuff like arsenic, lead, and sulfur dioxide. Even rain is acidic, wrecking local plants. In La Oroya, there's a metal factory that makes things like gold, silver, and cadmium. That factory is the main job provider in the city. Yet, in 2007, experts said that this place was one of the most polluted spots on Earth. People are working hard to clean up the mess and make life better there. Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic is the most isolated spot on Earth. It's a tiny bunch of islands with just 246 people living there. There's no place to land a plane. If you want to visit or leave, you're in for a boat ride. It's a 6-day journey all the way from South Africa, about 1,500 to 1,700 miles away. Now, probably the most dangerous place to spend your life is the Pacific Islands of Vanuatu. You would be living life on the edge, dodging volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis every day. UN's World Risk Index classifies this place as the riskiest spot to call home. Satellite data says sea levels around Vanuatu have been rising by about 6 millimeters every year since 1993. Plus, in April 2020, the island got smacked by Tropical Cyclone Harold, the worst in 5 years, with harsh winds hitting up to 155 miles per hour. Our next one is a place where loads of people are crammed into a tiny space. Manila in the Philippines has an estimated 184,570 people packed into every square mile. Manila is that crowded because of the city's economic growth in the past 50 years, mostly thanks to its bustling port. More money and jobs mean more people moving in. With people comes pollution and traffic jams, which turn life there into an everyday struggle. Oh, and finding a place to live in Manila is like searching for a needle in a haystack. A massive housing shortage adds even more chaos to the mix. Yakutsk in Russia claims the crown for being the city with the lowest winter temperatures. In 1891, it hit minus 83.9 degrees Fahrenheit. It isn't the coldest place on Earth, though. The Eastern Antarctic Plateau in Antarctica holds that record with minus 137 degrees Fahrenheit. Yakutsk is the coldest city in the world for a few reasons. Firstly, it's far from the sea, with no warm ocean influences. Secondly, a high-pressure system brings frigid air from the Arctic during winter. Sunlight is a rare sight in Yakutsk during winter. The city sits on continuous permafrost, meaning the ground is always frozen, too. Around 355,000 people call Yakutsk home. What's surprising is that this spot cranks up the heat in the summer. In July, the average high temperature reaches 79 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than in London during the same season. Well, that's some wacky weather, huh?
Have you ever wondered why mountains seem so still and silent? Well, prepare to be amazed because these majestic landforms have some hidden talents. You see, mountains are actually quite the performers. They have their own unique songs and dance routines. What does it mean and how does it work? Well, let's see. Get ready for a chilling revelation. Mount Everest has a secret nighttime symphony, and this mysterious music will send shivers down your spine. When darkness falls over the Himalayas, a strange, eerie chorus echoes through the glaciers surrounding the majestic peak. A team of researchers embarked on a quest to unravel the mystery. Led by the glaciologist Evgeny Podolsky, they trekked through the freezing temperatures of the Nepalese Himalayas. Their goal? To uncover the source of these hair-raising noises. The team was amazed by the incredible size and beauty of Mount Everest. During the day, The weather was nice and they could work comfortably. However, when night came, it became extremely cold, reaching temperatures as low as -5 degrees Fahrenheit. At that moment, something interesting happened. The ice on the mountain started to break apart and make loud booming sounds that echoed through the valley. To solve the mystery, the team used advanced technology that is typically used to measure earthquakes. They placed sensors on the surface of the glacier and listened to the vibrations it created. They also looked at information about temperature and wind. By comparing all of this data, they made a very important and exciting discovery. The culprit behind this frozen orchestra? It's the sudden decrease in temperature. The icy surface of the glacier is very sensitive to these changes, causing it to crack and split with loud booming noises. This discovery helps scientists understand how glaciers behave in a world where climate change is becoming more pronounced. This adventure is really important because it gives scientists who study glaciers and the climate in faraway places like the Himalayas very valuable information. The melting of glaciers in that area is happening really fast, and that's a big problem. It's a serious threat to South Asia. Recent research shows that the glaciers have been melting 10 times faster in the past 40 years compared to the previous 700 years. But this isn't the only reason why mountains can make strange noises. Other mountains might also sing their own songs. For example, Mount Matterhorn. Guess what? Everything around us has its own special rhythm. Objects vibrate at certain frequencies because of their shape and what they're made of. You've probably seen it before with tuning forks and wine glasses. When they're hit with the right frequency, they start shaking and making sounds. But here's something cool. Even mountains have their own groove. They vibrate in their own unique way. Jeffrey Moore and his team of adventurous scientists wanted to find out if mountains can dance to their own music, just like bridges and tall buildings. They thought that the special shapes of mountains might make them vibrate at certain frequencies, which is called resonance. But testing this idea wasn't easy. Unlike buildings that engineers can shake or bridges that vehicles can drive over, mountains are massive and hard. It's hard to make them move on purpose. Not giving up, Moore and his team took on a big project. They wanted to study how the shaking of the earth affected the famous Matterhorn mountain. This incredible mountain is located on the border of Italy and Switzerland. It looks like a pyramid. It's really tall, reaching about 15,000 feet high. It has 4 sides facing north, south, east, and west. With the help of helicopters, the scientists put special devices called seismometers in specific places on the mountain. One was placed at the very top and used solar power to work. It was as small as a coffee cup. Another seismometer was tucked beneath the floorboards of a cozy hut on the mountain, and a third one was placed at the base of the mountain to compare the measurements. Together, they were the tiny observers that kept recording the movements of the mountain all the time. And they finally detected it. Even though the mountain's movements are incredibly small, scientists discovered that the Matterhorn gently sways back and forth about once every 2 seconds. What's truly surprising is that the top of the mountain moves up to 14 times more than its base. The Eiffel Tower kinda does the same thing. This giant iron structure is a pro at handling windy days, and when a storm blows through, it's not afraid to show off its swaying skills. It's like the tower is saying, "Hey wind, bring it on." But the reason behind the mountain's movement isn't just wind, as it may seem. So, why do mountains do that? Why do they dance and make a humming sound? Are they having a party that we're not invited to? Well, it's all because of something called seismic energy. When earthquakes happen in different parts of the world, their energy travels through the earth and causes the mountains to vibrate. The oceans also join in this mountain music. When waves move across the ocean floor, they create vibrations called microseisms. It's like the Earth's own heartbeat, felt all around the world. And guess what? The frequency of these vibrations matches the way the Matterhorn sways. It's like the mountain and the oceans are chilling together. So the next time you see a mountain, remember that it's not just standing still. It's actually part of a global symphony created by the Earth itself. This research helps us learn how earthquakes can affect steep mountains that are prone to landslides and avalanches. It also gives us a new way to appreciate mountains like the Matterhorn. They have their own hidden songs, swaying and vibrating to a mysterious melody deep within the earth. But there's one more pretty cool thing about the mountains. They don't just talk themselves. They may also influence the way we talk. Turns out, languages spoken in high-altitude areas have special sounds that you won't hear elsewhere. After studying 567 languages, linguists found that 92 of them use a special kind of sound called ejectives. These sounds are made by pushing air out forcefully from the back of the throat. This creates bursts of speech that give these languages their distinctiveness. Scientists were really surprised by this connection. These sounds, like a strong K and Ka, are not common in English or European languages. But some indigenous languages in North America and the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea have them. What's even more puzzling is that Tibetan languages, spoken in mountains, don't use ejectives. Linguists are curious to unravel this mystery and learn more about how mountains and language are connected. So, why do some languages spoken in the mountains have special sounds? Well, it's a bit of a mystery. Researchers have some cool ideas. One idea is that these sounds might help people keep their throats from getting dry when they talk in the dry air of the mountains. Another idea is that the lower air pressure up there makes it easier to make these sounds, but scientists are still figuring out the real reason. Although some experts are not entirely convinced by this explanation. They say that while geography can influence language, there are other reasons why languages might be similar, like borrowing words from nearby languages or being close to each other. But this research has still given us some amazing insights. Mountains not only shape the way our world looks, but they also shape the way we talk. So, the next time you're exploring a mountainous area, listen carefully to the local language. You might hear unique sounds and words that are influenced by the mountains themselves. It's like nature is sharing its own special secrets through the language of the people who live there. And remember that the mountains themselves also have a voice, and they're speaking to us in their own special way. Scientists are still on an exciting adventure to uncover their secrets. So let's see what are some cool things they'll find out in the future. Stay tuned.
Hi there! I invite you to look at some of the coolest phenomena Mother Nature has. I'll start with the red sky. I admit that this scenery is kind of scary, as if it's a scene from a movie. How can our blue sky turn red? Zhoushan's authorities assured people that this abnormality wasn't related to solar activity. This tint appeared due to the refraction of red lights from fishing boats. That day, the weather was foggy and cloudy. The light got reflected from the low-hanging clouds. When weather conditions are right, aerosol particles and droplets of other liquids in the atmosphere refract and scatter the light. In this case, the light source was on fishing boats. Since we started with reflections, we can continue with a forest in Japan that looks as if it's come straight out of a fairy tale. It turns out there are real mushrooms that glow in the dark. They're known as forest fairies, but their official name is the Mycena luxeeli. They're bioluminescent fungi. It means that they glow. These mystical-looking mushrooms are scattered all over old trees and soft ground. You can see them in several different forests in Japan. They've been attracting tourists for many years, since they were first discovered in the 1950s. It makes me feel like I'm looking at a picture from a secret neon-themed party in the woods. Moving on from one mesmerizing forest to another, this one is underwater. There are lakes and there are forests. Kandy Lake in Kazakhstan offers you one inside the other. The lake is almost 100 feet deep. It has a beautiful turquoise lime color, and the submerged trees are seen below the surface. An earthquake in 1911 is the reason why this sunken forest formed. The quake created a huge limestone landslide that formed a natural dam. Rain and water filled the dam. The water covers the tree roots entirely, yet their top parts remain above the surface. This gives the lake a spooky vibe, especially if the weather is foggy. What does it look like under the water? Don't hurry to put on a scuba diving suit. No need to dive in, because you can see the lake's depths from the shore too. The water is super clear. There aren't many rotten tree trunks. In fact, the trees have miraculously resisted decomposition. You can even see the needles on their branches. You can thank the lake's consistent temperature for that. No matter the season, the temperature rarely goes higher than 43 degrees Fahrenheit. In the winter, the lake gets frozen, and people go fishing and ice diving. You can still enjoy the view through the crystal clear ice layer. The next dream destination is Bolivia. Imagine standing on a 4,000 square mile mirror. You can do that in Salar de Uyuni. It's the world's largest natural mirror, since it's a reflective salt flat. The surface is so flat as a result of thousands of years of transformations that happened to several prehistoric lakes. There are other lakes close by, and when they flow into this one, the flat surface turns into a, well, I'll say lake, but it's around 20 inches deep. Yes, the water layer is super shallow, but that's enough to transform the area into a giant mirror. For most animals, this area is non-habitable because of harsh living conditions. Yet flamingos visit this lake's chain of pristine lagoons to feed and breed. 3 out of the world's 6 species of flamingos come here. As you can guess, this is the perfect spot for photographers and tourists. They take cool pics of flamingos standing on the giant mirror lake. Would you like to see the Sea of Stars? Then you should visit the shores of Vadhu in the Maldives. Vadhu is a small island that'll surprise you at nighttime. Do you remember the glowing forest in Japan? Here we have glowing blue waves. The waves shine thanks to a natural chemical reaction called bioluminescence. Phytoplankton is the type of plankton that's responsible for the blue glow. It looks like the water shimmers when waves hit the shore. The next stop is in the southwestern U.S. This is The Wave in Arizona. It's a unique sandstone formation. The sediment has a rippling form and interesting colors. It's made of intersecting U-shaped troughs that have been eroded over time. The wave was formed millions of years ago. This one-of-a-kind formation is popular among hikers and photographers. Yet, it's not easy to visit this place. The formation has a fragile nature, so only around 60 people can visit it in one day. These people should apply for a permit and join the daily lottery system. Do these look like regular trees? Nope. The entire forest is technically one tree. This phenomenon is called clonal groves. All these trees are connected underground by a single root network. That's why trees look like they're copied and pasted with the help of Photoshop. Each trunk is genetically identical to the others. We're now looking at the most famous example of clonal groves, which is Pondo from Utah. It's one of the largest and oldest organisms on our planet. Pondo has 47,000 stems, and it originated from a single seed. It spread by creating new shoots from the expanding root network. Another mesmerizing phenomenon is this Indonesian volcano that has blue flames. It looks like the lava itself is blue when you first see it. In reality, the lava turns blue due to sulfur. When sulfuric gas meets with oxygen at an ultra-high temperature, it burns. Bright blue flames appear, and then lava flows through the mountain. This feature is visible at night. During the day, the lava looks like a regular orange liquid. Ice can come in different shapes and forms. Here is a less known one, the jewel ice. This type of ice can only be seen in Japan's Tokachi River. The river has crystal clear water in general. When the temperatures drop and the river freezes, ice chunks move with the waves to the riverside. These giant diamond-like ice pieces are transparent. That's why they reflect light differently. If you visit the lake at sunset, you'll see golden yellow ice stones. But at any other time of the day, they look blue. It depends on how light scatters in the sky. Another beauty comes with a winter breeze. If you step onto the frozen Abraham Lake in Canada, you'll see ice bubbles under a layer of ice. It might look like they're out of this world, but this beauty isn't so innocent. These ice bubbles are made of methane. Since this gas is flammable, these white orbs aren't perfectly safe. Why are there frozen methane bubbles in this lake? Well, it's due to the natural process of decomposition. Plants and parts of trees deep down at the lake's bottom decay. When this occurs, plants release methane, creating air bubbles. In the meantime, the temperature decreases. Ice bubbles can't reach the surface and get trapped in the ice. It looks kind of like a lava lamp. Even though it's winter and snow might fall, super strong winds wipe away everything from the lake's surface, so we can appreciate this potentially dangerous beauty. How about seeing some flaming rocks? Yanartas is located on an inactive volcano mountain in southwestern Turkey. The name of this rock formation is related to its appearance. It literally means flaming rock. The rocks have been flaming for at least 2,500 years, so they're full of tiny fumaroles that release gases such as methane. The gas ignites when it comes into contact with oxygen and creates eternal flames. Yanartas isn't the only special rock that produces eternal flames. There's a small waterfall in western New York that creates these types of flames too. The same principle applies to the Eternal Flame Falls. The grotto at the waterfall's base emits natural gas. Gas is the reason why flames form. Oh man, I want to see all these wonders with my own eyes. I just wish I could teleport. Welcome to Ever City. It's a megapolis built inside a relatively young mountain. Everest is only about 55 million years old, but it's already the highest mountain in the world, 29,000 feet. Picture the Statue of Liberty. Now, imagine she had 83 twin brothers and sisters, and they were all standing on top of each other. If you wanted to get there back in the day, you had to pass some serious fitness tests, train for months, have perfect health, and spend a lot of money. Oh, and be a little crazy. Now that Mount Everest has been turned into a city, though, you don't need any of that stuff. Well, except money. Apartments here don't come cheap. It's easy to navigate around Ever City. The whole thing's basically 6 circles. It looks like a finger with 6 rings on it. The lowest and largest circle is the residential area. The highest and smallest ones near the top is where the richest people live. Below that is the meditation circle. Then a circle for hotels, and 2 circles of pure entertainment. Ever City isn't built like an ordinary city. You won't find tall houses or 6-lane highways here. Almost all buildings are built inside the mountain. At first, people were building ordinary houses, but strong icy winds and avalanches kept knocking them down. Then, engineers decided to build houses inside the mountain. They're connected by underground tunnels. From the inside, the mountain looks like a system of labyrinths. The entrance to Ever City is located at the foot of the mountain. Every day, hundreds of thousands of cars enter and leave the city. There's no factories or power stations inside. Electricity, gas, food, everything comes from the outside world. That's why all the stuff in Ever City's so insanely expensive. People want to keep the mountain covered in snow. That's another reason why there's no factories and stuff. There's almost no heating in the houses. People live here like they do in those ice hotels, but you don't need to go around wearing a bunch of layers. Designers created special thermal pants, socks, and t-shirts that go under your regular clothes. All that, plus jeans and a t-shirt, is totally enough to keep you toasty warm. To keep your face fresh, they've come up with a special cream. It warms and moisturizes your skin, and it's SPF 100, which is about what you'd need if you liked walking around on the top of Everest. Want to stop by a coffee shop, then grab a double bacon cheeseburger and maybe a slice of cheesecake? That'll set you back about $500. A movie ticket costs at least $100, and internet's so expensive, you'd have to pay about $1 just to watch this video. Even so, more and more people are moving to Ever City every year. It's peaceful and quiet. You feel harmony and unity with nature. There's also a world-famous meditation center on its own special circle. People from all over the world come here to get their body and mind back into harmony. But the greatest draw is that you can visit the summit whenever you want, like it's your daily walk in the park. Before Ever City, conquering this mountain was extremely dangerous. There's 3 times less oxygen up there than in almost any other city. If your body doesn't get enough oxygen, you can find yourself in big problems. Climbers used to take oxygen tanks with them, which slowed them down and made everything more complicated. It's hard to get out of the way of an avalanche with huge metal cylinders on your back. Strong winds are a big problem too. At the top, the wind can blow at 100 miles an hour. Try to nail one of those jumping selfies and you'll be blown clean off the mountain. It's so cold that icicles form on your hair and your skin gets covered with a thin crust of ice. And when you're up there, you have a special terrible superpower. A loud scream could cause an avalanche. But now, everything's chill. To get to the top of Everest, you just need to sit in a comfortable snowmobile capsule. It'll protect you from any bad weather or the odd avalanche. If you get covered with too much snow, you just turn on a powerful heater, wait a few for the snow to melt, and continue on your journey. Oxygen cylinders inside the cabin let you breathe normally. The new road to the top is well lit, and there are signs everywhere, so you never get lost. The only problem is traffic. Every day, thousands of people want to visit the highest point on the planet. You might have to wait in line for several hours. But don't worry, all Everest City capsules are equipped with high-speed internet, an 8K screen, and game consoles. And if you get hungry, you can always order food, delivered by the latest AI robot snowmobile. You made it! So quickly find a parking spot, leave your capsule there, and head to the ski lift that'll take you straight to the top. Now, all you have to do is put on an oxygen mask and enjoy the view. While you're up there, you notice an ad inviting you to dine at the highest restaurant in the world, just 100 feet below the summit. It'll set you back around $10,000. Tempting, but you're not hungry. Feel like the king of the world. Dine with us at Best Food Everest. Pretty good ads, but you already feel like the king of the world. You scream with delight and... well, unfortunately, you just can't stay up there forever. There's not that much space at the top, so they only give you about a minute to enjoy the view. But it's okay, you can come back tomorrow. There are 2 ways back down the mountain. You can get in your capsule and drive home, or grab a snowboard and ride down. But before you rent some skis or snowboard, you need to show your Everest driver's license. It says if you've passed the special snowboard and skiing test. You take a snowboard and jet down a lit track. You zoom past the top of some houses sticking out just below the summit. That's where the wealthiest people live. They can just walk out their front doors and take a special elevator up to the top. You'd need to be a billionaire to have one of those houses, but there are over 2,000 of them right now, about half of them from the USA and China. Unfortunately, you live much lower down the mountain, but that has its advantages. The lower you live, the less you pay for food, entertainment, and electricity. You glide into the meditation center for a bit. A special ventilation system delivers air directly from the top of the mountain, plus a little added oxygen. You breathe in pure harmony. All 6 rings of Everest City have 360-degree views, and from way up there, all you can see is peaceful snowy mountains mixing with wispy clouds. After meditation, you head down to the entertainment rings. They've got it all: coffee shops, any meal you can think of, shows, bowling, arcades, even an ice skating rink that's half inside, half outside the mountain. There are different gyms, but they all have one thing in common: sun baths. You lie down in a hammock or bed, and curtains slide apart above your head. The sun shines through the sealed windows, and you get a full dose of the purest sunlight on Earth. Just 5 minutes, and you're ready for the rest of your day. If you don't want to go outside anymore, you can get home through the tunnels. They're not dark and cold, if that's what you're thinking. Everest City tunnels look like ice caves, lit up by hundreds of lights. It feels like a snowy fairy tale. After a short walk, you get to your apartment. It's compact, but cozy. To save money on electricity, you chose to go without a fridge. No problem, you keep your food in a little box just outside your window. The snow will keep it cold. With the help of a heating and filtration system, you get all the water you need from the millions of tons of snow on Everest. It's the cleanest water around. In the evening, you go down and watch a movie. There's an outdoor cinema at the foot of the mountain. At night, a huge machine projects movies directly onto the snowy surface of Everest. You watch the movie in capsules, either alone or in groups, kind of like a drive-in. Come on over! Visit Evercity any time of the year.
Hundreds of thousands of years ago, rivers of volcanic lava rushed through what is now Spain. With time, it turned to rock and formed a crag over the abyss. Back in the Middle Ages, someone decided to build a village on that basaltic rock between the rivers Fluvia and Torinel. They named it Castellfollet de la Rocca. You can see it from the distance, and from sunset till midnight, the cliffs are illuminated, making it look even more like a mysterious medieval castle. The village is shorter than a mile and is made up of narrow, shadowy streets and little squares that all blend into one main artery. Most of the buildings here are made of the same material as the pedestal the village stands on. It's all volcanic rocks. The place is so tightly pressed together, it feels like one wrong step and you'd fall into the abyss. The village has the only working basalt quarry in Spain. The tallest building in the village is the St. Salvador Church. It has a history dating back to the 13th century and was rebuilt many times. This is one of the smallest towns in Catalonia, with a population of just around 1,000 people. Yet, it has two museums. One of them is history-themed, and the other one is Museum of Cured Meats. That's right, you can learn the history of meat making and taste local specialties for free. The town of Monterey, USA, has a mayor, a clerk, a treasurer, a librarian, a tavern keeper, and a bartender. Yet the population is still just one. Elsie Eiler has been doing all those jobs, paying taxes to herself and voting herself for mayor since 2004. Back in the 1930s, Monterey had a population of 150 people, with working grocery shops and restaurants. When farming conditions got worse, people started leaving, family by family. Till now, there's just one. Hey, you can save some good money on ceilings and back walls in this Spanish town. 3,000 locals live under and in the sides of Cadiz Mountains and use them as natural backup. The first settlers moved in here in the prehistoric times. The rocks are perfect for keeping cool in the summer and warm in the winter. The Australian town of Coober Pedy is famous for precious opals found here and for its underground residence built from old abandoned mines. Back in the day, the miners could hardly work under the burning desert sun, so someone decided to put a tent directly in the mine. Later, it turned into a home. Now, there are 3 churches, a bookstore, an art gallery, a bar, and hotels with swimming pools underground. Moroccan Chefchaouen has become famous worldwide for its blue houses. The town was founded to stand against an outside invasion in the 15th century and was originally white. Some people believe it was painted blue to symbolize the skies, others to repel mosquitoes and prevent the spread of malaria. In either case, the locals are proud of it and regularly add a new layer of blue on their walls. Any cat lover in the world should put Aoshima, Japan on their bucket list. There are 6 times more cats than people on this cat island, with just about 15 humans and over 100 felines living there. There are no restaurants, hotels, or even cars in Aoshima. Tourists just come here for the purrs. If you were more of a bunny person, you gotta love another Japanese island, Okunoshima, also known as the Rabbit Island in Seto Inland Sea. They say some boy let 8 rabbits run free on the island in 1971, and the number quickly grew to 700 over the following years. You can also enjoy hot springs, beaches, and cycling here. Giethoorn Village is nicknamed Venice of the Netherlands, and it doesn't have a single road for cars. It's all about waterways, walking paths, bike trails, and little colorful houses. Its 2,000-something residents mostly live on private islands and have to cross one of the 180 bridges to go places. That or a popular whisper boat with a tiny silent engine not to ruin the romantic atmosphere. Every place is unique, unless it's a well-made Chinese replica. Thames Town is a good proof of that. It was finished in 2006 with faux Victorian and faux Tudor buildings, fish and chip places, and red phone booths everywhere. The place is super popular for UK-themed wedding photo shoots. You can also find a replica of an Austrian village of Hallstatt, the Sphinx, the Eiffel Tower, and Venetian canals, all within China. The entire town of Whittier, Alaska, lives under one roof of a 14-story building of a former military barracks. That's 200 people, plus all the shops, a police station, a post office, a hospital, and a church. The idea behind all this is to save money on heating in the always cold climate and let the people have everything they need in one place. This way, they don't have to face the strong winds outside. Residents and tourists in Miyakijima, a Japanese island in the Philippine Sea, never leave home without a gas mask. The place sits at the base of an active volcano, and there are always high levels of dangerous sulfur gas in the air. Ooh, that must smell good. Kidding. The locals are paid by the government to live here, and the tourists come for scuba diving and to watch dolphins and rare birds. Another dangerous place to live is in Pennsylvania. Centralia used to be a big coal mining center. Then somebody decided to do a landfill cleanup that led to a fire, and it's been burning for decades now. That and the sinkholes in the area turned the place into a ghost town with about 5 original brave residents left. The Italian village of Viginella was built right at the bottom of a deep valley and on the wrong side of the mountains. They cast a huge shadow and deprived the village of the sun for the entire winter. The locals used to live like that for centuries, until one engineer decided to build a large mirror high on the opposite slope of the mountain. It's operated by a computer and reflects light on the central square of Viginella for at least 6 hours a day during the darkest months. The name of this town, which I can't pronounce, translates to oil rocks and is located entirely in the open sea on the world's first offshore oil platform. Its population of around 5,000 regularly changes. People come here in shifts for a few months. It has legit hotels, bakeries, recreation centers, and whatever else you'd expect to find in a regular town. Its future is unclear though. Once the oil reserves end, it will not likely stay afloat. The Japanese town of Nagoro is known as Scarecrow Village. The last children were born here over 20 years ago. It officially has less than 50 residents, but it feels complete thanks to 350 life-size human dolls. When a local lady came back here in 2000 to look after her aging father, she saw the empty streets, shops, and schools. To change that, she and her friends started making cute dolls to replace the residents. If you're looking for the most relaxed place in the world, you could try the villages in Florida. 2 important conditions to move here are: 1. There must be at least one person over 55 in your home, and 2. You have to leave behind any family members under 19. The most popular means of transport in the villages is a golf cart. There are all sorts of fun, free activities for the residents, so it's far from being boring. There are many places around the world where people live in caves in the side of mountains. Matmata in southern Tunisia stands out because the local Berbers make their own caves of sandstone. They've been digging large pits in the ground and then smaller caves for rooms inside for 1,000 years. Many locals still prefer this traditional housing option, even though there are more conventional houses on the surface. There's a village in India that gets more rainfall than any other place in the world. To adapt and survive somehow, the people of Mawsynram have learned to build natural living bridges that are made of rubber tree roots and don't rot as much as usual wooden structures. Those who work outside wear full-body umbrellas made of bamboo and banana leaves. Hey, if you're reading this, I want you to know why I did it. It all started with getting rid of air travel. Then they ripped up the railroads. Finally, they got rid of inner-city roads. Towns were isolating themselves from each other. For safety, they said. And to make it official, they built the domes. Day 1, 6:48 a.m. It's a monumental occasion, and you don't want to miss it. After 5 years of construction, your town's dome was finally completed last night. It cost over $150 billion, but it was a smart investment in a self-sustaining future. Inspired by the dreams of yesteryear, there were ancient buildings with massive domes that stood for millennia. Then sports stadiums adopted this strongest of architectural shapes, superdomes they called them. Indoor sports resorts under the protection of a dome, like tropical islands in Germany, giant biodomes and greenhouses, such as the Eden Project in the UK. The next step was only natural. Cover it all, the whole town. 7 a.m. on the dot. Your second alarm snaps you out of your thoughts, sitting there in bed waiting for the big moment. It's time for the first sunrise. It looks so real that you initially think something's wrong, that the dome is gone. But if you could see it up close from your downtown apartment, you'd notice the hexagonal plates. You can, of course. This thing is as tall as Everest. It takes 10 minutes for the sun to fully rise, and then the room is as light as if it were midday. You finish your coffee and toast and walk outside. You and everyone else in this town of 100,000. No more megacities like New York and London. They were broken up and put under domes of no more than 500,000 residents. Can't have too many people breathing all the oxygen, right? Some people are out jogging. Others are reading books on park benches. The weather's perfect, of course. It's a steady 71 degrees, what scientists found to be the most comfortable temperature for people. No more surprises from Mother Nature. She can be gorgeous, but also cruel and destructive. No, now humanity controls the weather. You spend the whole day walking around town, but the streets start to clear up after lunchtime. A half-hour rain shower is scheduled every day at 2:30 p.m. to water the crop fields. Day 2. Sunrise 7 a.m. Temperature 71 degrees. You always know what to wear. There are no more meteorologists, no more weather forecasts, no more getting caught in unexpected rain without an umbrella. There's only stability, safety, uniformity. You've decided to spend your Sunday with friends. You talk, laugh, and just enjoy each other's company. Nobody's distracted by a phone screen or social media notifications popping up every 2 seconds. Towns have been disconnected and closed up. There is no more internet. Day 3. Monday. Back to class. You get on your bike and make the short ride to campus. The roads are full of other commuters, other cyclists, kick scooters, skateboarders, walkers. No drivers. Cars emit exhaust fumes, and dome life can't afford that. You're majoring in civil engineering. Most universities have switched almost entirely to agricultural studies. Farmers, botanists, soil scientists, and the like. That's where all the jobs are in this little self-sustaining ecosystem. But you're interested in a particular internship. The best student in your faculty will be invited to work in the dome department. You're sitting there taking notes when all of a sudden the lights go out. The classroom, no, the entire town is in complete darkness. Your professor tries to keep everyone calm, but all you can think is, what if the light never comes back? It's the first time you've thought about it. You're under the dome, utterly dependent on it running smoothly. You feel so vulnerable. A couple of minutes in the darkness feel like centuries. But then, the sky starts to blink and the light comes back. All the students let out a sigh of relief. Seems you weren't the only one having those thoughts. That's when a message appears on the dome above and you hear a voice read it. Dear citizens, it seems the dome needs more energy than we expected. Please have patience as we try to figure out this issue. For the time being, we'll be restricting private use of electricity. Thank you for understanding. Day 6. Life under the dome went from stable, predictable perfection to major inconvenience. The electricity ration went from 60% to 30%, down to 15%, and finally none. You've been thrown back into the dark ages. No more refrigerators, TVs, and vacuum cleaners. The townspeople are patient, but that patience is running out fast. Day 8. They're now limiting daylight hours, and the daily rains aren't coming. Something terrible is going on with the dome. A lot of businesses have closed, classes are canceled, and tension is building up among the people as food runs slim. Day 10. Your cupboards are empty. Time to head to the grocery store. When you get there, the shock freezes you where you stand. The store is almost completely empty. No food, no soap, no nothing. You managed to find some canned goods that had rolled under a shelf. There's also one remaining bag of potatoes with gnats flying around it. Maybe there's some produce in another store. You walk to the one on the next street. Nothing. A third, empty. You go to every store in the area, only to be met with the same result. The city is out of food. That evening, you get another announcement from the Dome Department. They finally come up with a solution. They're going to start renovating the town to make space for more fields. They'll get rid of unnecessary facilities, and some people will need to move in with friends. It's not ideal, but it's better than being hungry. Day 23. The streets are mostly empty now. The few faces you see are usually quiet and gloomy. Must be the limited light. At least there's still air and water. But how long before those run out? Eeriness fills the town. Month 2. There's no money, no more stores, no buying. The community has switched to a barter system. Need a haircut? Pay someone with a head of lettuce. A few potatoes will buy you a newly sewn shirt if you can find some fabric. Month 3. Good news. They've made substantial progress on the town renovations. There are a little more crops, more food, and people are pretty well fed. Classes and businesses are opening back up. It seems the city might just survive this thing, but the residents' minds have already been shaken. At least your mind has. This isn't how the world should be. Cities need each other. They exchange services and goods. That's how you get development and progress. Humanity used to go to space, and now we can't even go to a neighboring town. You have to change something. Month 6. You're hitting the books harder than ever. The renovations are done, and your town looks like a whole different place. It's all covered in fields with corn, grain, and potatoes. 70% of the space in the dome is dedicated to crops. It feels like you're living in a greenhouse. You have mashed potatoes for breakfast, baked potatoes for lunch, and fried potatoes for dinner. You're sick of potatoes already. But at least hunger isn't a threat anymore. Nobody remembers what chocolate tastes like. Your graduation day is in a month, and it looks like you've got that internship in the bag. You wanted to work in the dome from the very beginning, but you want it even more now because you have to stop this. 1 year under the dome. You've been working in the dome's engineering department for a little over 5 months. You're a third shifter, overnight staff work in pairs. Your partner fell asleep just before sunrise, and that's when you finally get your chance. You leave the room and walk to the main service room. They wanted to protect you, but there's nothing worse than isolation. You have to end this. The button is right in front of you. Your heart is beating out of your chest. You take a deep breath, close your eyes, and hit it. A second later, you hear a scraping sound, and you can see the dome going down. The sky behind the descending walls is endless shades of orange, pink, and purple. Sunrise, not the digital one. And very soon, the whole town will wake up to the real sky and light summer breeze. You're back. And then you see the security guards approaching. Have to wrap this up now. Gotta go. Now, Mount Everest is every climber's ultimate dream. Every time mountaineers conquer a new peak, they're thinking, how tall is this compared to the top of the world? As humans, we're fascinated with climbing ever higher. And how high is the highest place on Earth? Just over 29,000 feet, plus 29 feet to be exact. But here comes the shocking part. Mount Everest is not the tallest mountain on the blue planet. And wait till you hear about the highest mountain in our solar system. It'll make Mount Everest seem like a dwarf. But first, let's get our bearings right. Altitude is the vertical distance from sea level to any point on Earth. Anyone can easily measure it using a neat little device called an altimeter. If you're in New York, then you are just 33 feet above sea level. Makes sense, the city sits on the Atlantic coast. On the other side, literally, is Leadville, Colorado. I've been there. The town's altitude is over 10,000 feet. That makes it the highest elevated city in the United States. It's a breathtaking place. Actually, you can forgive its residents if they're sometimes short of breath. On a scale of altitude, Mount Everest is the highest you can go. Enough about the human scale of things. Let's take out a huge measuring tape and see how tall the mountains are. Their height is not measured from sea level, but from the mountain's base. This shrinks Mount Everest by more than half. This number can never be exact because it's hard to determine where a mountain's base is. In this category, the title goes to Mauna Loa in Hawaii. Sorry, Everest, you only get a consolation prize. But the mountain in Hawaii isn't a mountain at all. It's a volcano, and an active one too. Its base lies deep beneath the waves of the Pacific Ocean. Total height of Mauna Loa just over 30,000 feet. But Earth's champion is on the short side of our solar system. It barely made it to the top 10. Number 9 is Maxwell Mons on Venus. It stands at 36,000 feet tall. The mountain is part of a long range, longer than the Grand Canyon. Scientists first discovered it during the 1960s and named it after a famous British physicist. This guy. Maxwell Mont is the brightest spot on Venus. Scientists guess it's because it's rich in iron. Number 8 on the list is Elysium Mons. This mountain is a volcano in the part of Mars that is littered with record-breaking peaks. A big fish in a small pond, you could say. The mountain's height is near the top level that jetliners fly on Earth. An orbiter discovered Elysium Mons in 1972. But there was one odd thing about this volcano. It had no obvious lava flows on its sides. That's probably the best type of volcano to build your house next to. So if you decide to stay on Mars, then visit another volcano, Venice Mons. It is some 5,000 feet higher than Elysium Mons. When we translate its name from Latin, we get Peacock Mountain. Wow, who gave names to these mountains? Peacocks live in warm climates, not on glaciers. Yes, you've heard right. There used to be glaciers on Venice Mons. Some scientists even argue that there are glaciers even today. And what are glaciers made out of? Correct, water. The red planet definitely has similarities to Earth. Glaciers also exist on Archaeologists Mons. This is Mars' second tallest volcano. We'll get to number 1, don't worry. But what about the height of Archaeologists Mons? Just imagine how long the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is and multiply it by 4. But you wouldn't want to drive anywhere near this mountain. It's home to a weird weather phenomenon. Every year, a dust cloud forms on its slopes, and this is not your everyday sandstorm. This cloud is more than 600 miles long. Tired of Mars a bit? Okay, let's travel to Jupiter. Sadly, there aren't any mountains here since it's a gas giant. But one of its moons, Io, has some pretty interesting peaks. They're all connected by a plateau. That's a raised piece of real estate. The highest peak has a simple name, South. It's higher than most volcanoes on Mars. But it has one strange feature. One of the mountain slopes is at a 40-degree angle. Not a place where a designated driver wants to be. The slope on Io is so sharp that scientists believe it's the aftermath of a landslide. I mean, what else? Now, back to Mars. The planet seems to be a hot spot for tall mountains. At number 4, we have Archaeologists Mons. Again, it's not a mountain but a volcano. Its caldera alone is 11,000 feet deep. That's the huge gaping hole at the top of the volcano. The same spacecraft that discovered Elysium Mons found this formation as well. That's the volcano without any lava flows, remember? In 1971, Mariner 9 took a photo of Mars during a sandstorm. There was an interesting spot in the photo. Scientists weren't very imaginative and named it the North Spot. Once the dust had settled, they realized it was a mountain. So that's how Archaeologists Mons got its name 2 years later. Now, you know that planet with a ring around it, like my bathtub? Yes, it's Saturn. We're not interested in the planet itself, but in one of its moons. There lives the bronze medalist of the High Mountain Olympics. It is actually not a single mountain, but a ridge with peaks well over 65,000 feet. The ridge runs around the planet's equator. Other planets have equators too, don't think we're that special. The equator is the line that runs around the middle of any celestial body. But this Saturn's moon is everything but ordinary. It has a giant crater that makes it look like something straight out of Star Wars. Coming in hot at second place is Rhea Silvia Mons. When we say coming, we really mean so. You see, this mountain is not on a planet, but an asteroid. Even weirder, it's not a mountain, but an impact crater. Over 300 miles in diameter. The crater is almost as wide as the entire asteroid. That must have been one powerful collision. Now, I'm not talking about the distance from the mountain's base to its top. No, I'm talking about the distance from the base of the crater to its peak. That's one giant hole. You can fit 2 Mount Everests inside it and still have room to spare. The mega mountain is 1 billion years old, and the impact that created the crater scattered debris all over the solar system. And a lot of it ended up on our planet. 5% of all space rocks we find on Earth come from this asteroid. Now it's time to roll out the red carpet. Our solar system's largest mountain is Olympus Mons. Its home planet? None other than Mars. And what about that record-breaking height? Bear with me, close to 72,000 feet. That's 30 times as tall as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building on our planet. And the total size of this giant? Well, the square footage would match the state of Arizona. Olympus Mons would be the ideal navigation tool. You just can't miss it on the horizon. But it is a gentle giant. The average slope of its flanks is 6 times lower than that of the escalator at your local mall. Once at the top, you'll see nothing but a red, rocky desert for miles around. Other Martian volcanoes in the area are huge as well. On average, they're 10 to 100 times bigger than Earth's largest volcanoes. But how did these mountains get so big? Well, unlike our volcanoes, the Martian ones don't move. You see, Mars doesn't have tectonic plates. On Earth, those plates move like a conveyor belt as fast as our fingernails grow. This is how mountain ranges and islands are formed here. But on Mars, lava is always going to spew out at the same place. So their volcanoes, such as the reigning champion Olympus Mons, grow in size over time.
It used to be one of the most prosperous ancient cities. It had features that were unthinkable for other locations during the Bronze Age, like water systems and intricate architecture. Yet somehow, it didn't become famous. What's even more mysterious is that at some point, it became abandoned. Mohenjo-Daro was a thriving city during the Indus Valley Civilization in the Bronze Age. It had a population of at least 40,000 people. It was close to Mesopotamia and Egypt in terms of social, cultural, and economic features. Despite this, it's lesser known than the more famous cities in these regions, like Babylon or Memphis. It was eventually abandoned by 1700 BCE, and the reason for its abandonment and the fate of its inhabitants remains unknown to this day. In 1911, archaeologists discovered the ancient city of Mohenjo-Daro after hearing reports of some unusual buildings in the area. However, local Indian authorities dismissed them as not having any historical significance, and the site remained untouched for several more years. It wasn't until 1922 that a local specialist believed he had found a buried local monument at the site. This led to large-scale excavations and the eventual naming of Mohenjo-Daro as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1980. The remains uncovered showed us that Mohenjo-Daro was an incredibly modern city for that time. It is considered the best preserved ruin of the Indus Valley. One of Mohenjo-Daro's most impressive features was its advanced sanitation system. Unlike in Egypt and Mesopotamia, where such appliances were only for the rich, Mohenjo-Daro had hidden toilets and covered drains throughout the city. Excavations have uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a city-wide sewage system. The people of Mohenjo-Daro were highly aware of their surroundings. As the city was located near the Indus River, they built a strong defense against floods by using clever drainage systems. Over the centuries, they produced beautifully crafted pottery, jewelry, figurines, and other items that were traded as far as Mesopotamia and present-day Oman. Archaeologists have observed the use of standardized building materials in this ancient city, even though they didn't have the necessary machines back in the day. Interestingly, all the bricks were nearly the same. This shows great attention to detail in the city's design, as using consistent bricks creates an elegant look in the spaces within the city. People living in this area used the Indus Valley script to communicate with each other. This mysterious alphabet might be the key to unlocking more secrets from Mohenjo-Daro. It was a language that used symbols instead of letters and had over 400 signs. Problem is, we're still trying to figure it out. The mystery of what caused the end of the Indus civilization and Mohenjo-Daro remains unsolved. Some archaeologists suggest that the Indus River might have changed its direction. This could have led to problems in cultivating food if there was suddenly too much water in the city. However, there is no evidence that flooding destroyed the area, or that it was completely abandoned at once. A change in the river's course couldn't have been enough for the entire Indus civilization to disappear. Mohenjo-Daro isn't the only lost town from Eastern civilizations. Ross Island, for instance, was once known as the Paris of the East due to its stunning architecture and gardens. However, the island is now a shadow of its former self, with the buildings being largely overtaken by tree roots and vines. Located 1.8 miles off the coast of Port Blair, India, the small territory was initially used as a jail, but later became a luxurious resort for its administrators. After the complex was closed in 1937, an earthquake further damaged the island and it became uninhabitable. Today, the island is managed by the Indian government and attracts tourists interested in exploring abandoned towns. Another lost city tells the story of why Kolmanskop, a ghost town located in Namibia, is still home to remnants of German architecture. Once a luxury destination in the early 1900s, it was settled by German workers looking for diamonds. The city boasted amenities such as a ballroom, a hospital, and even a bowling alley. However, its popularity began to wane in the late 1910s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants left in search of better fortunes, leaving the buildings behind. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town from the nearby town of Lüderitz. Hashima Island is a reminder of how nature reclaims its land when humans leave. It was famously featured in a James Bond movie due to its eerie atmosphere. The island was initially opened in 1881 for undersea coal mining, and the population of the island grew to a peak of 5,000 people in 1959. Unfortunately, the mines closed in the 1970s, and people began to slowly leave the island, resulting in complete abandonment in a period of 3 months. Now, the island is a popular tourist destination as visitors explore deserted homes, swimming pools, stores, and factories. The discovery of gold in a creek near Bannack, Montana in 1862 caused the population of the town to grow from a few hundred to thousands in a few short years. Unfortunately, this rapid expansion was followed by a sharp decline because more gold had been found in other areas nearby. As a result, Bannack was eventually made the first territorial capital of Montana, but only held the title for less than a year before being replaced by Virginia City. The state of Montana later acquired most of the land in 1954 and made it Bannock State Park. The ancient city of Petra, located in Jordan, was fascinating because it was half built, half carved into the rock and surrounded by mountains. It's a popular tourist destination these days, but at one point, it was abandoned too. Many things led to its decline, like bad government and changes in how people traded. Natural disasters didn't help either. This city saw a lot of earthquakes ruining its constructions and damaging its water systems. Since people had no place to live, no water, and nothing to sell to make money, they eventually moved on to better locations. The city remained hidden for almost 500 years until it was rediscovered in the 1800s. Most of the tourists going to Santorini have no idea that the island is home to the remains of one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history, the Thera eruption. This catastrophic event took place some 3,600 years ago. Akrotiri, one of the towns on the island at the time, was buried under the eruption. Unlike Pompeii, however, no traces of people and civilization were found, suggesting that people had enough time to flee the volcano before it blew up. Henry Ford, the renowned American industrialist, created the Ford Motor Company in 1903. In 1927, he began working on a grand project, Fordlandia. His goal was to construct a massive rubber plantation near the Tapajos River in Brazil to provide a steady supply of rubber for his car tires and hoses. His idea was to make the town a paradise, with swimming pools, golf courses, bungalows, and even weekly square dancing sessions. Unfortunately, the trees in the plantation soon became infected with leaf fungus, making the project a failure. Ford invested a whopping $20 million in this endeavor, yet it was unable to produce the necessary rubber. So Ford sold the land to the Brazilian government in 1945. The buildings that were built are still there, although they have been taken over by nature and are visited by tourists. Sky City is a residential area located in the Asian Hangzhou suburbs. It was built in 2007 and was intended to be a replica of Paris. The city even has its own Eiffel Tower, as well as copies of other iconic Parisian landmarks like the Opera Garnier and the Champs-Élysées. It also has luxurious villas and apartments, a man-made lake, gardens, and parks. Despite its grand plans, it's almost completely abandoned. Nobody wants to live here because it's really expensive. It is, however, a pretty nice location for locals to take pictures, in case they want to trick people into thinking that they just landed in the French capital. There's a heavy snowstorm. The cold penetrates his bones. His legs are almost knee-deep in snow. Experienced hunter Joe LaBelle makes his way through the forest, covering his face from the headwind. Any other person would have already fallen and screamed in despair, but not Joe LaBelle. He can survive in any circumstances and always knows what to do. Right now, he's heading to one of the villages in the far north of Canada. This small settlement is located on Lake Anjikuni. The inhabitants of this village are Inuit, indigenous people of North America. Joe hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time. He needs a good sleep and a hot meal, which he hopes to get from the hospitable Inuits. Through trees and a white haze, he notices the silhouettes of tents. Smoke is coming from some houses. Joe will probably get there in time for lunch. He reaches the village, and at this moment, the wind calms down. The blizzard has ended. The hunter speeds up and goes toward the village, located along the frozen lake. It's strange, but there are no locals anywhere. Probably everyone is just sitting in their houses, waiting out the blizzard. "Hello!" Joe says loudly, but gets no response. Oh, great! Smoke is coming out of this tent. Joe knocks on the wall, but no one opens it. He knocks a few more times and goes inside. The little tent is empty. All things are in their places. There's a piece of cloth with needles and thread on the table. Firewood is smoldering in the fireplace. It seems that people have just left this place. Joe goes into the next tent and sees the same picture. All things are in their places, but there are no people. Joe walks past the tents and sees a pit where a bonfire once burned. There's a rope above it, with the meat that the Inuit were cooking hanging on it. For some reason, they didn't eat it. Lake Anjakuni is part of a chain of waterways. Here, the Inuits fished and traded various goods. Usually, there are many people here, but now something has forced them to leave their homes. Why did they leave their things behind? And where did they go? There are no tracks around the village. All the sleds are in place. The Inuits have even left their dogs here, and dogs help them to hunt and ride sleighs. No one will leave warm clothes and dogs here when moving away, especially in severe weather. Joe LaBelle knows all this, so he concludes that something terrible has happened here. His body is shaking, not from the cold, but from fear. After going around the entire settlement, he finds not a single soul. Terrified, he leaves the village, heads for the nearest telegraph pole, and sends a message to the police. After a while, more and more people arrive. The police are trying to find traces of missing people and figure out what has happened, but there's nothing. Near the village, they find an empty grave. During the ceremony, the Inuits placed stones around the burial site. The rocks around the open pit lie untouched, which means it wasn't an animal that dug it up, but who or what needed it. About 30 people lived in the village, and they're all gone. Local residents from neighboring villages can't help, since they have no idea what has happened. The only thing that the police have noticed is unusual blue lights. In this area, the northern lights are a common phenomenon. People living here regularly see a glow in the starry sky. But the police have seen something else, pulsing blue lights. Also, other hunters have witnessed something similar. They say that some strange things were flying in the sky. This all happened in 1930. It's been almost 90 years since the disappearance of the village, and people have created a bunch of theories. The most popular of them is an attack of an extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the blue lights in the sky that the locals and the police saw were spaceships. Some believe that one ominous night, these ships flew to the settlement and took away all the people. In addition to these sci-fi versions, there were also more realistic ones. Internet users have found out that Joe LaBelle didn't have a hunting license. Maybe he wasn't a professional and made it all up. But at that time, many hunters didn't have a license, so Joe's words may be true. But if we try to find out where all this information came from, we'll see that the primary sources were books and some newspaper articles from the 30s. But none of them can confirm that the mysterious story of Lake Anjakuni is true. Perhaps this entire story was made up. Now let's leave the snows of Canada and head for the hot plains of India. In this big country, there's one sinister village where people also disappeared without a trace. This happened in the first half of the 19th century. Still, locals avoid this place even now because they believe that invisible evil forces live there. Let's check and find out what happened to the village of Kuldara. It's located in the district of Rajasthan. To get there, you can use a taxi to get to the nearest village or city. The village is located far from other settlements. It looks deserted. There are only ruins. It looks like archaeologists have recently dug this place out of the ground and left it here. But this is not an ancient city. The village was abandoned more than 200 years ago. But up to that point, this place had been thriving. Kuldara was a large village. Local people were mostly farmers. They sold their agricultural products. And then, one night, everything changed. People abandoned their homes and stuff and ran away from there. No one knows why they did it. and no one knows where they went. Nobody has ever seen the inhabitants of Kuldara again. Apart from tourists, almost no one comes here. The locals are sure that the village is cursed and is the center of paranormal activity. If you ask residents of other nearby towns or read the information on the internet, you'll learn a couple of legends about this place. One popular version says that people left this village because of a lack of water. However, this version doesn't explain why the residents did it overnight and left their things behind. According to another version, the villagers ran away to save the daughter of the Kuldara chief. One local ruler fell in love with her and wanted to marry her. He threatened the locals with grave consequences if the girl rejected him. The ruler gave them 1 day to make a decision. The residents disagreed with such a requirement. As a sign of solidarity, they decided to leave the village together with the chief and his daughter. But if this is true, why did no one else see these people? They must have escaped to another settlement. In addition, they needed their things on the way there. The stories of Kuldara and Lake Anjakuni have one thing in common. People left a comfortable and safe place for an unknown reason. A similar story happened in Ireland with a small village on the island of Achill. About 40 simple houses made of stone and straw were located along the valley of Keem Bay. The village was mentioned in documents dated back to the 1830s as a group of small buildings. But today, there's practically nothing left of it, except pieces of walls and small mounds of ground. People from other settlements don't remember this village, but we know about it thanks to the records of travel writers. They describe the incredible beauty of this place and the village in their diaries. Students of the local archaeological school tried to find the answers. They started excavations and discovered that the villagers could have left the village because of hunger or some disease.
According to the United Nations, India became the most populous country in the world in 2023. Can you guess where the United States of America stands in that rating? It's number 3. And America is the 4th largest country in terms of size. It takes up some 6% of Earth's landmass. Plenty of space for 335 million people who live there, right? No need to squeeze them into one region. Well, not quite. The population of the U.S. is distributed pretty unevenly. Let's draw a line right through the middle of the country. It'll run from North Dakota in the north to Texas in the south. Once you input census data and do some math, astounding figures appear. 80% of the U.S. population lives east of the imaginary line. The remaining 20% live to the west. That's just 1 in 5 Americans. We're talking about large metropolitan areas such as Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. You don't believe me? Just look at a satellite map of the U.S. at night. The right part is shining pretty bright, right? But why? Why is there such a huge imbalance in population? Simply put, history and geography. The East Coast is the place where the U.S. became independent in 1776. These are the original 13 colonies. Soon enough, settlers started spreading westward. One important milestone was the Louisiana Purchase. Today, this region is mostly what we call the Midwest. The area aligns nicely with the Mississippi watershed. Yup, this means plenty of fertile soil ideal for agriculture. But does this automatically mean a spike in population? The demographics of the U.S. reveal that a majority of its citizens live either on the east or the west coast. This leaves a large patch of land in the middle of the country virtually empty. People know it as America's underpopulated belt. The area stretches from the Canadian border in the north to Mexico in the south. The total surface area of this strip of land is 350,000 square miles. That's twice the size of California. One massive piece of land. In fact, this narrow strip accounts for 12% of the contiguous United States. That's the U.S. without Alaska and Hawaii. The belt runs north to south through 7 states, but its population makes up only 1% of the total number of people living in the United States. Now, this doesn't mean that the area is completely empty. It's still home to just over 3 million people. That's roughly the population of the island country of Jamaica. But there is room here for many more residents. Let's take the example of Nigeria. Its total land area is slightly bigger than the sparsely inhabited belt in America. But Nigeria's population is a huge 206 million people. This makes it the 7th most populated country on the planet. Impressive, right? But why isn't the American Midwest living up to its potential? Well, time for one last history lesson. I've already mentioned how the United States expanded from the East Coast to the West Coast. This doesn't mean that the West was lagging too far behind. Take, for example, the cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles. They were incorporated in 1850. That's just 13 years after Chicago. The following year, Portland, Oregon became incorporated. You get the picture. And then, in 1869, the United States completed building its first transcontinental railroad. In terms of transport, the country was unified. There is no historical reason strong enough to explain why so few people live in the center of the country. So now it's time for some interesting geography. If you look at the physical map of the United States, you'll notice that this belt lies in the Great Plains. As the name suggests, the area is flat, which should be ideal for large settlements. Well, not really. East of this region, there is a huge patch of the color brown. It's covered by mountains. But not just any mountains. These are the Rockies. The range is around 76 million years old. It has several peaks over 14,000 feet. And most of the Rockies are national parks, a vast nature reserve. But most importantly, the range plays a vital role in the region's climate. Ever heard of the rain shadow effect? Let me explain. Wet weather systems form over the Pacific Ocean. Then they travel east, where they meet the Rockies. Now the air has to go up over the mountains. This is where it cools down and condenses. The final result? A lot of rain and snow for the people living on or west of the range. And just a few drops east of it. When air from the Pacific finally reaches the Great Plains, it doesn't contain much moisture anymore. In fact, the weather system starts taking up moisture from the surrounding landscape. This creates an arid climate east of the Rocky Mountains. That's the exact location of the belt where so few Americans live. It's one of the driest parts of the country. So when settlers came in the 19th century, they were like, nah, I'll just continue west. Plus, there was the gold rush in California they were heading for. The climate in this part of the plains isn't great for agriculture, and huge fluctuations in air temperature don't help either. In a single day, temperatures can drop from 70 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit. These sudden changes in outside temperature are harmful to human health. It's like stepping inside an air-conditioned room on a sizzling summer day. Not a pleasant feeling. Southern California has a similarly dry climate, yet close to 40 million people live there. This makes California the most populous U.S. state. Their secret? A vast network of irrigation canals and aqueducts, plus a share of water from the Colorado River. Summers in the Great Plains get very hot, while winters are extremely cold. The reason behind these wild weather patterns are polar winds. They get a piggyback ride along the ridges of the Rockies and then rapidly descend into the plains. A winter day in Wyoming, for example, can start pleasantly warm, but later in the afternoon, the temperature can easily drop below zero. You just wouldn't know how to dress, and you probably wouldn't want to relocate here. That's what 99% of Americans think too. Humans like to feel comfortable, so we choose to live in temperate climate zones. Places that are either too cold or too hot don't have a large population. Just look at the driest inhabited continent. You've guessed it correctly, it's Australia. Nearly 70% of the country is either arid or semi-arid. That's a subtle way of saying that it's a desert. That's why Australians are huddled in coastal areas. 90% of them live in big cities, such as Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth. The only exception is the capital, Canberra. They build it inland close to a water source. But Australia's interior is sparsely populated, just like in the States. There is only one major town in an area the size of 12 Lake Michigans. A huge shout out to the residents of Alice Springs. They truly live in an oasis. And what about places with a temperate climate like Europe? The population is evenly distributed here, right? Well, yes and no, depending on the country. In Germany, 77% of people live in urban areas. They have plenty of major cities to choose from. Berlin, Hamburg, Munich, and Köln all have over 1 million residents. But let's look at neighboring France. How many cities with a population over 1 million can you name? Okay, Paris, definitely. It has over 12 million residents in the metropolitan area. But now comes the staggering fact. The next two cities on the list have a population of barely 2 million, respectively. Can you notice the huge imbalance? This is the case in most large European countries. In Greece, for example, 35% of the population lives in the capital, Athens. So, the largely underpopulated center of the United States is not a unique example. America is the land of opportunities, but chances of finding a better life are greater in large cities. The country's top 100 metropolitan areas account for at least 3/4 of the nation's GDP, and most of them are located on the east and the west coasts. There are no cities with over 1 million residents in America's underpopulated belt.
You are lost deep within the jungle in the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. There are strange noises all around you, and to make it worse, the sun is setting. Soon, you'll be alone in the middle of an unknown rainforest. Guess it was a pretty bad idea to come looking for El Dorado on your own, wasn't it? You keep walking as fast as you can, when suddenly, wait! What's this you're seeing? It looks like large stairways made out of stone. This definitely doesn't look natural, so you take a picture. Maybe you didn't strike gold, but you might have just found something relevant. Congratulations! You found Akamtun, a long-lost Mayan city, hidden 37 miles into the jungle. The name literally translates to stone column. Stone was probably in at the time, so these guys used a lot of it to build their pyramids, houses, and even ball courts. If you ever thought that Europeans invented ball games, think twice. Mayans love to play ball games for recreational purposes. Akamtun is part of a series of other long-lost Mayan cities that are being discovered with the help of new technology nowadays. We'll talk more about the other ones in a jiffy. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this one is that it was surrounded by wetlands, which is why the city was built on high ground. The city was monumental, covering an area of over 120 acres. That would be as big as 90 football fields right next to each other. Scientists have found proof that Akamtun had pyramids of up to 49 feet high, and that it was likely an important social hub between 250 and 1000 CE. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the 19th century. Modern technologies, such as LiDAR imaging, help archaeologists see through dense canopies of the forests. This means that people don't really have to risk getting lost in the tropical jungle like you did at the beginning of this video. LiDAR works sort of like an X-ray. It sends out laser beams that can detect any signs of ruins or ancient constructions. According to space archaeologist Sarah Parchak, satellite imagery has been a key player in discovering ancient cities in South America, Egypt, and other places. Sarah herself spends most of her days scouring images for any signs of where there could have been cities long ago. She says that more often than not, what happens is that ruins are covered by vegetation, soil, or sand, which makes them super tricky to find. But thanks to these awesome tools, scientists also made the huge discovery of ancient Mayan causeways, which spread throughout old Mayan territories. I mean, take a look at these roadways. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places such as Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130 feet wide roads painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these. and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan highways we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over the swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possible 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spiderweb, and from what archaeologists have gathered, this huge system of roads worked to connect a big system of economic and social interactions between Mayan cities. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 2000 BCE, was made of small, tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids, with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone to make them white. That's pretty cool, right? But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize. And they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Mayans had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, and plazas. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. If you've ever seen examples of ancient Mayan cities, this is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan conquest state. At its height, it was comparable in importance to cities such as London or New York in today's world. It's composed of a series of complex monuments. The North Acropolis is one of Tikal's most ancient complexes of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. Then there's Chichen Itza. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castillo, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. You can see that these folks were a pretty big deal, huh? That's why nobody can really understand what happened to them. There's a big lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? New research in 2017 did bring some new discoveries into the mix. Using data from a site at Ceibal, located at southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected demise of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. It's hard to pinpoint the exact causes, though. But hey, recent discoveries are shedding a big light on humanity's past. Not only about the Mayan Empire, but about other long-lost civilizations of South America. A major recent discovery in Brazil was done using satellite imaging technology and is also shocking scientists. Some images from near the Xingu River, also in the Amazon, suggest that cities of millions of people might have existed inside the jungle, way before our modern civilization ever existed. I mean, if this doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Satellite imagery also detected a network of trenches dating back to 200 and 1200 CE in the Bolivian Amazon forest. These proofs suggest settlements that could have supported around 60,000 people right in the middle of the Amazon forest. When researchers from the University of Florida went on ground to check the satellite information, they were shocked to find several mounds that were accompanied by ditches and geoglyphs. Archaeologists also found remnants of carefully designed walls centered around plazas, much like the type of construction done by the ancient Mayans.
Have you ever wondered how cool buildings of the future are going to look? Well, hold on tight because artificial intelligence is here to revolutionize the world of architecture. AI is a great sidekick. It can give the architects incredible new tools to create mind-blowing structures that are not only stunning, but also eco-friendly and super efficient. So let's check what our beautiful future might look like. First of all, you know how cities can get crazy busy and overwhelming, right? Well, guess what? AI is here to save the day and make our cities super smart. Imagine you're cruising down the road in your flying car. Yes, we'll have those. Thanks to AI, the traffic flows like a dream. No more endless gridlock. The city knows where the most likely crime spots are and takes proactive steps to keep us safe. It's like having superheroes on every corner. And hey, forget about trash piling up. AI makes sure waste is managed efficiently, keeping our city clean and fresh. They can act as a city manager who can optimize everything from traffic to safety and even waste disposal. They can analyze tons of data from all sorts of places like sensors and social media. With all that information, they can help city planners make brilliant decisions that make our lives better. Okay, so you stroll down the street and your eyes are instantly captivated by an extraordinary building. Its futuristic curves and features make it stand out from the rest. And it not only catches your eye, but also gives Mother Nature a high five. You might think it was designed by a genius architect, but little do you know it was actually a collaboration between humans and artificial intelligence. Imagine having a super smart design buddy who can whip up thousands of incredible building ideas in a blink of an eye. That's what AI-assisted design software does for architects. It can generate and assess a ton of design options. They take into account stuff like the best materials to use and the perfect placement for the building. Also, by analyzing data and crunching numbers, algorithms can help optimize the building's design. They can ensure it minimizes energy usage, conserves water, and manages waste like a pro. Every building strives to reduce costs, save energy, and promote a better world. The result? Architectural masterpieces that are both jaw-droppingly beautiful and super practical. The cityscape of the future will be dotted with these awe-inspiring structures. Oh, but that wasn't impressive enough for you? Well, how about a stunning, futuristic building that seems to defy gravity? It's not made of traditional bricks and mortar, oh no. This marvel was created using the powers of 3D printing. With the help of AI, architects designed every intricate detail and fed all the important data, like what materials to use and how the site conditions might affect the structure. AI algorithms worked their magic to optimize the design, making it both breathtakingly beautiful and rock solid. 3D printing is basically like having a magical machine that can create awesome structures straight out of a sci-fi movie, and AI jumps in to make sure these structures are not just pretty, but also strong. In the city of the future, 3D printing will become the ultimate architect's tool. It will allow them to create structures that were once impossible to build. From mind-bending shapes to intricate details, the possibilities are endless. But AI isn't just making buildings look great, it also makes them efficient and cozy. Let's say you step into a futuristic office building, and voila! The lights automatically adjust to match your mood, and the temperature is set perfectly for you. These futuristic buildings are capable of sensing and responding to their surroundings, just like you do. They control the lighting, keeping it just right for the time of day. They manage the temperature, so it's always cozy and comfortable. They even keep a watchful eye on security and fix small issues before they become big headaches. So, the smart building knows when people come and go, so it optimizes energy usage accordingly, saving the planet and some cash along the way. Now the cool thing is, all these aren't the only possibilities. How about turning skyscrapers into a vertical forest? Recently, an architect from India got super excited about the power of artificial intelligence. So, he decided to team up with an image bot called Midjourney to create a vision for the future. But instead of a dull, robotic world, they aimed for something spectacular. With text prompts like utopian technology and futuristic towers, the architect and AI got to work. Guess what? Midjourney didn't disappoint. It conjured up a world where buildings were covered in lush vertical forests and adorned with shapes inspired by nature. They wanted to create a sustainable future that harmonized with the environment. The architect, Manas Bhatia, is super positive about AI's potential. He doesn't see it as a threat to his job, but as a powerful tool for positive change. He envisions a future where architects and AI collaborate to make breathtaking designs. In his project, Bhatia even asked the AI to imagine symbiotic and hollowed structures, and it responded with pictures of apartments nestled within hollowed-out trees. Imagine a world where the building itself becomes a living, breathing part of nature. Well, Bhatia believes that nature should play a big role in architecture. He loves designing structures that embrace nature's beauty and functionality. From buildings built around trees to facades that regulate temperature, he's all about blending architecture with the natural world. With architects like Bhatia and the superpowers of AI, the future of cities is going to be amazing. So get ready to step into a world where nature and technology coexist in perfect harmony. It's a dream we can't wait to see come true. Or, if you're not a big fan of trees, how about this? Skyscrapers that aren't made of solid bricks, but instead, they're inflatable wonders. Zumo, an architectural practice in Barcelona, used the magic of AI to bring these wobbly structures to life. These inflatable superstructures rise above future cities like illuminated balloons in the sky. Here's the best part. These inflatable buildings have sustainability superpowers. You can pump them up to towering heights, flatten them for easy transportation, and rebuild them wherever they're needed. Plus, they're powered by renewable energy, reducing their impact on the environment. Pretty cool, right? Phew. The future is zooming toward us like a rocket. Artificial intelligence can become the secret sauce that makes architects' work extra special. But hey, with great power comes great responsibility. We need to use AI wisely and ethically. For now, we don't have to worry about machines replacing architects. Artificial intelligence still needs a human hand, or else we might end up with buildings that look like mashed up bananas or ice cream cones, unless that's your thing. In addition, humans have one important advantage. They, well, are humans. We need to keep in mind that artificial intelligence doesn't have emotional intelligence. It's a brainy genius, but it can't fully understand the feelings and vibes we humans crave in our spaces. So, we must remember to infuse our designs with that human touch, those warm and fuzzy elements that make us go, "Ah, I feel right at home." And let's not forget that AI is still learning. It's basically just taking its first steps, and we need to be patient and give it time to grow. Rushing things too quickly could lead to wonky designs or buildings that look like a jumbled puzzle. This might look cool if you like avant-garde architecture, but for regular folk, no thanks. So, as the future unfolds at warp speed, let's embrace the wonders of AI in architecture. But let's also remember to balance its brilliance with our own human touch. Together, we can create a future where buildings are not just functional, but also filled with heart and soul. It's an adventure that's out of this world.
Let's check out some places that look like they're out of this world. Welcome to the vibrant, colorful world of Burano. It's an island in Italy. The first thing you'll notice is the striking and bold panorama formed by the rainbow of colored houses that adorn the island. Nowadays, Burano is mainly a tourist hotspot, with only a handful of locals calling it a home sweet home. The island is also home to the traditional style of lace making that's been around for centuries. Sure, you might find some cheap knockoffs in souvenir shops, but the real deal is handmade by a select few artisans in town. Anyway, you might be wondering why the Burano folks decided to paint their houses like in a Skittles commercial. The answer lies in the island's history. Let's rewind to the beginning. The first houses built on Burano were made of reeds and mud, and only later, thanks to the Romanization of the area, the houses started to be made of bricks. Yet, colors were not seen there until the birth of the famous lace industry, which brought an economic surge and fame to the island. The island was mainly inhabited by fishers. They experienced a lot of trouble during frequent winter mists. To solve this problem, they started painting the facades of their homes with identifying colors to find their way back home even in the thickest fog. Another theory suggests that different colors identified different families on the island, and some believe that the humidity and local women were behind the variation in colors as they repainted the facades with paint they mixed from various sources. Let's head to another island. This one is in Japan, and surprise, it's ruled by cats. Aoshima has over 200 furry feline friends, mostly orange and brown tabbies and calicos, and they're all waiting to say hello when you arrive. You can stroll around the island with them, sit back and relax as they play and sleep, or just enjoy the peaceful waters. The locals feed the cats every day, so they don't beg for food. However, it's always nice to give them some cat food in a designated area, or play with them using toys to make them even happier. Aoshima wasn't always a cat island. It used to be a thriving fishing village where cats were brought to hunt mice. As fishing declined, the human population dwindled, but the cats remained and prospered. Some cat lovers discovered the island, and the rest is history. Thanks to the internet and word of mouth, Aoshima has become famous worldwide and is now a popular destination for cat lovers. Now, check out this crazy sinkhole on the Oregon coast near Cape Perpetua. It's called Thor's Well, and it looks like it's straight out of a movie. They also call it the drain pipe of the Pacific, which is kind of hilarious if you think about it. Basically, it's a hole in the rock that seems to swallow all the ocean water around it. Some scientists think it used to be a cave. This thing is a sight to see, especially during high tides or storms, when the waves go wild and crash into the hole. Just be careful, because you don't want to get swept down into the abyss. The next stop is Pamukkale in Turkey. It literally means cotton castle. This place is home to the most beautiful white water pools in the world, formed by thousands of years of flowing water and carbonate minerals. Pamukkale is steeped in ancient history and legends. People have been coming here for centuries to experience the healing properties of the hot springs. The story of a girl who turned into a stunning beauty after bathing in the pools is just one of the many tales that surround this enchanting place. The mineral-rich waters slowly drip down the mountainside, cascading down these mineral terraces into the pools below. The terraces are made of travertine, which is a fancy-schmancy sedimentary rock that gets deposited by the mineral water from the hot springs. There are around 17 hot springs there, with water temperatures ranging from a toasty 95 degrees Fahrenheit to a boiling 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The water travels 1,050 feet to the head of the travertine terraces and deposits calcium carbonate on a section that's about 200 to 230 feet long. When the water gets super saturated with calcium carbonate, it spits out carbon dioxide and then deposits calcium carbonate on the surface. It starts out as a soft gel and eventually crystallizes into travertine. Cool, huh? In Myanmar, there's a surreal jungle village of crumbling temples called Nuang Ohak. Okay, so it's not the easiest place to get to, but trust me, it's worth it. After a serene boat ride that lasts about an hour, you'll walk through the charming little village. The floating market is where you can grab some fresh fish and veggies, and maybe even do a little haggling. Then, you'll see a couple of fancy new temples painted in bright white. They're super cool and all, but the real magic happens when you lay your eyes on the ancient crumbling temples that have been around for centuries. These structures have never been renovated. The intricate details of every temple and different Buddha statues are like a time machine, taking you back to the olden days. The whole vibe is just so awe-inspiring. it will leave a lasting impression on anyone lucky enough to visit. Have you heard of Colombia's Rainbow River? The name says it all. This place is a psychedelic burst of colors. The river flows, and it's like a liquid rainbow, with hues of red, yellow, purple, and more. The colors change depending on the light conditions, so you never know what you're going to get. The riverbed is covered with special plants, which make stuff pop with shades of red, and the waterfalls only add to the already epic view. Now check out this place called the Guayaquil Depression. This geological formation was caused by the continental drift of 3 tectonic plates. I mean, what are the odds? No wonder it's one of Earth's most unusual environments. You can find it in Ethiopia. Guayaquil Depression is known as one of the hottest places on the planet, and it's home to salt lakes, lava lakes, volcanoes, and colorful acidic springs. It's like a whole other world down there. So how did this funky place come about, you may ask? Well, as the African and Asian tectonic plates drifted apart, they left behind a huge hole in the ground. It's like Earth just opened up and said, "Hey, let's make something really cool down here." In addition to its wild geology, the Guayaquil is a hotspot for scientists studying the origin of life. There, they found the remains of Lucy, one of our early human ancestors dating back 3.2 million years. Plus, the acidic springs in the Dalal crater might hold the key to finding extremophile microbes. Those are organisms that thrive in extreme environments under high temperatures. Who knows what other mysteries this weird and wonderful place holds? So there's this beach near Fort Bragg, California, called Glass Beach. It's not because the sand is made of glass there, but because the beach used to be a dump site for garbage, including a ton of glass that was eventually pounded into tiny smooth pieces by the waves. You can't go around collecting that glass like some kind of treasure hunter, though. It's illegal. You'll have to leave it there for others to enjoy. The glass is slowly disappearing. It's getting ground down by the waves, and there are just too many tourists collecting it. So resist the temptation to grab a piece if you ever visit that place. Oh, and if you want to check out Glass Beach, there are actually 3 different sites where the garbage was dumped, but only one of them is adjacent to McCarrasher State Park. Do you recall any other funky places such as these? Go ahead and comment below.
From tiny islands to giant cities fanning out for dozens of miles, you're gonna learn about the most densely populated places on Earth. It'll make you question the limits of the impossible. To what lengths are people ready to go in their search of a better life, or simply trying to survive? The list of such places includes both Hong Kong and the Maldives, the Egyptian city of Tanta, and a tiny island in Lake Victoria in Africa. Let's find out more about how people manage to live there. Hong Kong has an official population of 7.5 million people, and this number is expected to reach 8.5 million by 2041. The density of the city's population is more than 18,000 people per square mile. Despite a rather low birth rate, the population of Hong Kong is on the rise. This paradox has an explanation. A lot of people immigrate to Hong Kong all the time because of all the opportunities this city offers, like various jobs. The city has an incredibly high price of land. It's one of the main reasons for its high-density development. People with low and even middle incomes can only afford to live in high-rise buildings, and Hong Kong has more than 9,000 of those. Plus, there are more than 300 buildings that are over 490 feet in height. It's more than New York, Shanghai, and Dubai can boast. Hong Kong's incredible growth as one of the tallest cities in the world has a lot to do with its incredible urban planning. At the same time, housing is unbelievably expensive in this region. Median home costs are 18 times the median annual income. That's the reason why less fortunate residents live in the so-called coffin houses, where apartments are tinier than a standard parking space in the USA. Take Quarry Bay, for example, a densely packed neighborhood in eastern Hong Kong, and its Monster Building. It's actually not one building, but a group of 5 connected constructions. There are more than 2,200 units in these 5 blocks, and rumor has it that it houses around 10,000 people. Despite such cramped living conditions most Hong Kong's inhabitants have to deal with, the city is home to several dozen billionaires. Look, this is half a football field. And that's what 1/3 of Bill Gates' home looks like. Another example for you. 2/5 of the White House. These are not random numbers. That's the territory of Migingo Island, located in Lake Victoria between Kenya and Uganda. Over 100 people live on this tiny piece of land. Don't you think that those metal-tiled roofs make the island look like a huge turtle floating on the water? Unfortunately, because of the island's small size, there's barely any vegetation there. Most of the surface of the island is covered with rocks, except for this tiny area. It's covered with grass and hosts not more than 5 shrubs. The island is all about fish and fishing. The landing point turns into a fish market every day at noon. The trade doesn't last long. It usually finishes at 2 p.m. when the boat leaves. The only thing the inhabitants of the island have is fish. So every morning, they get essential supplies for small businesses from Kenya. That's why you can buy everything you need in local stores, from food to fishing equipment. The inhabitants of the island not only catch fish but also gut them on the rocks and then fry and eat them in cafes. Yep, there are around 13 cafes and bars on the islands where people eat, play dice, and cook ugali, a typical dish made from maize flour. Back to giant cities and busy streets. Welcome to Shenzhen, the most densely populated city in China. This city hosts around 17.5 million people. With so many inhabitants, the city faces loads of challenges. For example, overcrowded schools and beaches. Speaking of the latter, some areas even implement a booking system to manage beach crowds. The most astonishing thing about this megapolis is that it's grown to its current size within a mere 40 years or so. It used to be a fishing village, but then, thanks to the support of the authorities and the city's close proximity to Hong Kong, it turned into a bustling financial and economic center. These days, it has the status of one of the busiest container ports in the world, along with Shanghai and Singapore. Shenzhen also has had the fastest growth in millionaires over the last 10 years, 140%. Such an increase is far greater than in the first-tier cities in China, including Beijing and Shanghai. Islet Abrui is a Caribbean island that forms part of Haiti, and it's one of the most densely populated islands in the world. Around 500 people living there share an area of a mere 0.4 hectares. You might think this is just another fishing village, but Islet Abrui is more like a factory. Once you set foot on this island, you'll instantly see a maze of alleyways. Follow them, walking past crooked thatch and tarp-covered huts, and you'll eventually find yourself in the center of town. The main landmarks are 2 concrete buildings, and one of them is a store. In the middle, you'll see a modest town square equipped with 2 solar streetlights. One is old and is no longer in use, and the other is shiny and new. On the island, men outnumber women and kids. Many people are out of town fishing during the day. The horizon surrounding the island is dotted with sails and pirogues. The rest remain on the island doing other jobs, like repairing boats, mending nets and traps, and preparing tons of fish for shipment to Haiti and other places. As for kids, they spend their days swimming. Our last destination is the Egyptian city of Tanta, which is also one of the most densely populated places in the world. It has about 70,000 people per square mile. Just for comparison, there are slightly under 30,000 people per square mile in New York. The city is located between Cairo and Alexandria. It has huge cotton plantations, and in 1856 it became a stop on the railway network, mostly for exporting the cotton growing in the area to Europe. And even though the area around Tanta was mostly fields, the settlement turned into a large, crowded city. In late October, the city becomes the center of celebration of the cotton harvest. 3 million people come from around the Delta and other parts of the Arab world for the colorful 8-day celebration. Tanta is famous for its sweet candy. It's made of gelatin, coconut, sesame, peanuts, and chickpeas. Loads of these sweets are sold during festivals when many Egyptians visit the city. No wonder they've been considered a delicacy since the 1800s. Tanta also has a lot of cotton processing factories, as well as textile industries. Plus, it's a university town. Tanta University was established in 1972. Male, the capital of the Maldives, has a population of more than 200,000 people. It means 49,000 people per square mile. 80% of the land sits around 4 feet above sea level, which means that if part of the islands go underwater, people will have to relocate. An artificial island that was created to manage waste is getting overburdened. In 1997, Hula Male, another artificial island, was built to alleviate dramatic population pressure. These days, it's already as developed as Male. The Maldives consists of more than 1,000 islands stretching along a 500-mile axis. All of them are coral islands. They grew around the rims of prehistoric undersea volcanoes. Only 188 islands are inhabited, but most of them have fewer than 1,000 residents. More and more Maldivians are giving up on island life and moving to the capital city. But Male is already pressed hard against the limits of human habitation. If even more people move there, its physical structure would need to be completely reworked. The authorities are already surrounding Male with sea bridges and artificial islands packed with houses.
Imagine you decided to take a road trip the old-fashioned way. And by that I mean you decide to do it without the help of any technology. What? So you go to the nearest convenience store and buy a map of each state you plan to pass through. You buckle them up on the passenger seat right next to you and set off on your adventure. During your first week, you arrive in the state of New York. You wave bye-bye to Lady Liberty, eat a slice of pizza, and head upstate. Near the Catskills, you notice you're running low on gas and decide to stop in the nearest town to fill up your tank. You check your map, and it appears that the nearest place is a small village called Aglo, right at the next intersection. You drive a few minutes and pass through a sign that says, "Welcome to Aglo, home of the Aglo General Store." Well, this must be it, you think to yourself. But the town is strangely empty. You can't find the store or the gas station you were looking for. There are no houses. You start to think there might be a mistake. Aglo doesn't seem to exist. This story may sound made up, but it could have actually happened to anyone passing through New York a few years ago. Actually, the so-called town of Aglo is what is called a phantom settlement or a paper town. There are several of these around the world, but Aglo is probably the most famous. Paper towns are basically fake towns. That is, they don't really exist. They're made up of Easter eggs put there by map makers as a kind of copyright trap. Maps are tough to make. To create a map from scratch, one has to do years of fieldwork or analysis of satellite photos. That's why plagiarism has always been rampant among map makers. It's pretty easy to redraw the same geographical features from one map onto a new map, and it is hard to get caught. People are, after all, drawing the exact same world. That's why map makers came up with a way to catch individuals stealing their data. Some map makers may include a mountain that is bigger than they are in reality. Others might add a slight turn on a road, where in reality there is none. For example, in the early 1970s, a fake mountain peak appeared on some Boulder County maps. The addition of this previously unknown peak, called Mount Richard, into local maps began to confuse Colorado rock climbers at the time. It turned out that Mount Richard was one of these copyright traps, put there by a local mapsman called Richard Ciacci. Let's just say he must have decided to pay a tribute to himself with this little addition. Now, adding a paper town is perhaps one of the most extreme solutions, one that mapmakers hope goes unnoticed. But that's not what usually happens, which leads us back to the Aglo story. Mapmakers Ernest Alpertz and Otto Lindbergh from the CDG, General Drafting Corporation, were part of the largest map publishers of the 1930s. Back then, the company was commissioned to create a map of the state of New York. That's when the two men had an idea. In order to prevent copyright infringement, they would create a phantom settlement combining parts of their names together. They came up with the strange name Agloe and added the fake town along Route 206 near the water reservoir of Catskills in upstate New York. The area was supposed to be, in reality, a dirt road. Years later, Rand McNally, another map designing company, produced a map of New York that included a town called Agloe in the same location where CDG had originally placed it. Lindbergh was convinced that he had a copyright case against his competitor, but the story just kept getting more complicated. Both companies went to settle the case in court, but as it turned out, McNally had a legitimate reason for adding Agloe to their version of a New York map. You see, in order to fabricate their maps, McNally did a thorough research on real estate and establishments located in each existing town. And as it turned out, Agloe was not an empty town when they drew their map. Records show that the town housed an establishment named Agloe General Store. Sure, it was the only building in town, but that was enough for the mapmakers to believe that such a town really existed. They added Agloe to the map like they would add any other town with physical establishments. It seemed they weren't infringing any copyright if this once phantom settlement had somehow come to life. The plot twist is that CDG's Alpers and Lindbergh could never have foreseen that someone would decide to occupy a made-up town. But it happened. One day, someone bought a map from a regional gas station that had Agloe marked on it. The person wanted to open a store more or less where Agloe existed, so they decided to name the store after the town it was in. They trusted the accuracy of the map they bought and named their business Agloe General Store. After all, why would there be a non-existent town on an official map? The general store didn't last many years, only enough to turn this story into a mess. On the bright side, this whole debacle turned Agloe into a super famous fictitious settlement. It became a tourist spot, with people driving from all over the U.S. to get a picture of the town's welcome sign. Now, as we said before, paper towns are plenty around the world and over time, too. A 2005 BBC documentary revealed that the City of London alone had over 100 tiny fake streets or paper streets around the city. For instance, the so-called Moat Lane is supposedly a curving road in Finchley, North London. But if you ever decide to go visit, you'll find nothing but trees and gardens. And what about Argleton, a town in the north of England? Or, more accurately, an empty field in northeastern England? Argleton existed for a while on Google Maps. There were hotel listings and apartments for rent in town. Well, the only thing is that they weren't really in Argleton, but rather in nearby settlements. It's believed that Google Maps imported these fake streets into its database, as they used renowned copyrighted atlases as their sources. But as the truth about these paper streets surfaced, the company later deleted them. If we turn back the clock a few hundred years, we'll find another mystery story involving a possible phantom settlement. But this isn't a tiny town at an intersection, but rather an entire island. Bermejo Island was speculated to be a tiny inhabited island. It appeared on many maps of the 16th and 17th centuries and was a hot spot for Spanish explorers. Its location sometimes varied slightly from map to map, and occasionally its name appeared as Vermija, but its existence seemed certain enough. It wasn't until the 18th century that the island stopped being depicted in maps altogether. This island's last appearance dates back to a 1921 edition of a Mexican atlas, and then, poof, it dropped out of the horizon altogether. The case of Mexico's disappeared island has raised many questions. Did it sink? Was it destroyed? Are people simply looking for it in the wrong place? 3 official investigations took place in 2009 to locate the island. They used high-end technologies, scouring Mexico's oceans and seabeds. Yet, Bermeja remained nowhere to be found. One can't help but wonder if the island ever existed at all. Similar to modern-day mapmakers, 16th and 17th century mapmakers had their way to trick map users. Instead of copyright traps, these fake towns or even fake islands served as a way to fool and confuse enemies and unwanted voyagers. Since a long time has gone by, it's hard to know whether Bermeja was just another phantom settlement. It stopped being depicted on maps, but this mysterious case still leaves people baffled and confused. Monday morning. The alarm is ringing cheerfully, and you vaguely remember you've already hit the snooze button, maybe not even once. You force your eyes open into narrow slits and look through the haze at the clock. 5:30. 5:30? You leap out of bed, sleep driven from your brain with an electric jolt. Work starts at 9, and you'll definitely be late already, but you may yet make it before lunch if you hurry. The kids are still asleep, of course, all 6 of them. Rushing through the house but trying to be as quiet as possible, you put on the first clothes you take out of the wardrobe and walk out of the apartment. On the elevator landing, there's already a crowd of sleepy people. Even 8 cabins aren't nearly enough to accommodate everyone in the morning. You take your place at the end of the line and wait. 2 elevators arrive, half full already, taking in about a quarter of the people on the landing. It takes another 10 minutes or so for you to finally cram into a cabin and start moving down from the 42nd floor. You feel bad for those living below. They have to wait even longer. It's 6 a.m. when you leave the apartment building and join the rushing crowd outside. As usual for this time of day, there's a huge traffic jam on the road nearby. The crowd of pedestrians is too big, so you have to walk slowly. In about an hour, you get to the subway and stand in line to get inside. It'll take another 40 minutes or so. Still faster than walking all the way to the office or driving. Underground, you have to wait for your turn to hop inside the train. They come every 5 minutes, but there are so many people that even cramming doesn't help. You only manage to get on after another 20 minutes. The doors catching the hem of your jacket. You stand flat against the doors, pushed into them by the press of the people. At the next stop, you have to get off the train to let others out. But when you try to get back, you're pushed by the crowd waiting to hop on and miss your place. Come on! The doors close and you wait another 5 minutes, pressed from all sides by anxious commuters. When the train arrives, you work your elbows urgently to get inside. Got it. You prepare for a long ride ahead. There's a similar ordeal awaiting at the next 4 stops. When you finally get to your station, you're already exhausted. It's 9:20, you're late as expected, and there's still some way to go. A crowd of late runners like you is even larger in the city center, so you take a deep breath and dive in. People are going different ways, so you have to push through, which makes the going painfully slow. If the streets were not so busy, it would take you no more than 15 minutes to get to the place. But in this mess, you spend an entire hour brawling your way. At last, at 10:30, you're at the entrance of your building, Demos Inc. Despite it being one of the biggest office buildings in the city, there's a line to use the 6 elevators as well. You roll your eyes and set to wait another half hour just to get to your floor already. Wow, you're in the cabin. What a relief! You press the button with number 33 on it and wait. Again. It's 11:03 a.m. You've been awake for almost 6 hours, and yet you've only just arrived at your workplace. Your colleagues are zooming around the floor like ants, and you carefully make your way to your cubicle. At least it's near a window, and you have a great view over the town. You look outside and see the familiar picture. Rows upon neat rows of skyscrapers, most of them apartment buildings combined with offices. It's been over 50 years since the anomaly happened. No one knows where it started exactly, but people began having quadruplets and even quintuplets much more often than usual. And strangely, it seemed to only affect this city and its suburbs. In the first decade, some decided it was something in the air or water of the town and moved to other places, but it turned out everyone who was born here was affected already. Even those who moved to other countries later reported to have up to jaw-dropping 10 children all at once. And not everyone wanted or even was able to leave town, so something had to be done. That's how Demos Incorporated appeared. Its mission was to both help the city adapt to the new circumstances and investigate the cause of such a birth anomaly. And the measures taken were drastic but efficient. First of all, the corporation invested into real estate development. Bigger families needed more space to live comfortably, so new apartment blocks were built with more rooms and more spacious interiors overall. People were offered to sell their old apartments and houses in favor of newer places to live, and most of them gladly agreed. There was a downside too, though. Those who didn't want to move soon found themselves surrounded by huge construction sites. Eventually, they couldn't stand the noise and dust and agreed to sell their dwellings. The whole city started transforming. Old buildings got demolished to make way for new, taller, and bigger ones. Roads were broadened for transport to move more freely. New businesses were opened to give jobs and services to thousands of new citizens. But that wasn't enough. Population growth was more rapid than city development. Thousands left, but millions stayed. The initiative to restrict birth was met with a massive civil protest and discarded. As a result, even with hundreds of skyscrapers, the city is terribly overpopulated. Its area has grown massively since the anomaly began, and now it's the largest city in the world, not only by population, but by area too. Working conditions have deteriorated as well. More and more people look for jobs that can be carried out from home because of incredible traffic jams. Others have found work in their own or neighboring apartment buildings. Yet others still, like you, are not so lucky. They have to wake up early in the morning just to get to work on time. It's not uncommon to have an alarm set for 4 a.m. At this time, it's relatively crowdless in the streets. Naturally though, nursing and tutoring have been booming all this time. Since every parent now has at least 4 kids to raise, they accept any help they can get. Single people earn good money babysitting for their neighbors and tutoring their kids of school age. Schools, by the way, have been built at an astonishing pace, yet still there aren't nearly enough of them to accommodate all the children. Parents register years ahead of time for their offspring to get elementary education. Entertainment has been hit hard as well. Numerous new restaurants, cinemas, theme parks have been opened within and beyond the city limits. But ordering a table or buying a ticket is a game of incredible chance. With the city population grown tenfold, you must plan your weekend at least 2 weeks ahead. And even going to the countryside for a picnic is an adventure in itself. First, you have to leave the city. Then, find a spot where there won't be crowds of nature-goers like you. And after you're done, it's a trip back home. Normally, people prepare for at least a 2-day stay in the country, because it takes 3 hours just to leave the town and another 3 to get back. Lost in thoughts about all this, you don't notice your colleague approaching you and start when she touches your shoulder. She smiles and apologizes, and you notice a folder in her hand. She traces your gaze and puts the folder on your table, opening it. Inside, you see some documents, but don't understand what they're about. Your colleague points to several paragraphs, and you have to read them 3 times before realization dawns on you like a hammer. It's a set of reports from several cities across the country. There are lots of numbers you can barely understand, but all of the papers have one thing in common. They end with a request for Demos Inc. to open a branch in their respective towns. You count the reports. 17. 17 new cities have just experienced the same baby boom you've been trying to cope with for half a century. Okay, here's a quick pop quiz on geography and touristy stuff. What's the biggest city in Italy? Did you say Rome? Then you got it right. Rome has a population of over 2 million people. And what would you say is the current population of Venice? Well, that's a tricky one to know by heart. But to answer correctly, in 2022, it was a little over 258,000 people. Now, what if I told you that for 80% of them, the Venice they live in isn't the tourist and historical one with all the canals? It's rather the other side of town. If you know someone who's traveled to Venice before, they may have sent you a postcard with an image of a gondola in a canal. I bet you never imagined that Venice could also just look like this, just a regular old Italian city. As tourists, we have a strong misconception about what Venice is. We think the real Venice is what we see in the movies. Well, I hate to be the one to pop your illusion, but there's more to Venice than straight canals and old bridges. Here are the boundaries of the real Venice. Probably the postcards you get only picture this bit of the city called Centro Storico, or Historical Center. But the city also includes the mainland, called Terra Firma, where most Venetians live today. The interesting thing to look at is how the number of people living in the historical center has decreased over the years. From then on, the number started to reduce more with each passing year. Today, only 50,000 people can afford to live there. To understand that, let's travel back in time for a moment. Before Venice became an important Italian city, it was nothing but a fisherman's village. It was only around the 5th century that people decided to take a chance and build on the marshy ground of the Venetian islands. If you've ever wondered how Venice holds up, let's just say it's due to strong blocks of wood driven deep into the ground. As it turns out, you need oxygen and water to ruin wood, and in marshy soils, there isn't much oxygen, so the buildings were safe. It was during the Middle Ages that Venice became one of the world's most important maritime empires. You might remember that's where Marco Polo, the famous merchant and explorer, came from. The city was extremely well located, right in the Adriatic Sea, and had access to huge commercial empires of the time, like the city of Constantinople. At that time, the most prestigious jobs you could get were like the ones Marco Polo had, anything related to long-distance trading. Since then, Venice consists of 118 islands, and some say there are around 400 bridges in the city. Quick question here, can you name at least 2 of the most famous Venetian islands? Let's start with Burano. The island of Burano is famous for its lace making and its super colorful landscape. FYI, Burano is also home to a less famous leaning tower than the one in Pisa. It's called the Tower of Burano. And then there's the island of Murano. They are famous for their products of fine glass. You can find anything from huge vases to water glasses, jewelry, and so on. They're quite exquisite, but also super expensive. But you know what they say, time changes everything. In the 20th century, Venice was no longer the trading hub it once was. Its economic power was failing seriously, so the city decided to invest in something else, its historical value. And the best way they found how to do that was through preservation. Let's face it, if you're a tourist who enjoys history, you would jump at the opportunity of visiting a UNESCO heritage site, wouldn't you? Initially, this was rather good for the city. But the thing is, as tourism in Venice skyrocketed, the old dynamics of the city started to change to keep up with the intense tourism. Truth is, in our day and age, lots of tourists rather buy small and cheap souvenirs than invest their money in expensive manufactured goods, such as the classic Murano glasses. The traditional Venetian stores that were open hundreds of years ago just didn't have the economic power to compete with new stores that opened to cater specifically for tourists. And then, what happened next is something we often call falling down the rabbit hole. Because, as it turned out, tourists attracted more tourists, and Venice lost control over it. The maximum sustainable number of tourists in Venice would be around 22,500 people per day. But in 2021, Venice saw up to 80,000 tourists per day in certain parts of the year. If you remember that there are only 50,000 people living in Venice's historical center nowadays, that almost means that tourists outnumber locals by 2 to 1. This is what gave Venice one of its current nicknames amongst the locals, which is a short-term city. I mean, if you live in a touristy city such as New York City or Paris, you'd be sure to avoid the parts of the city that are more touristy. But in Venice, that's difficult, since we're talking about several small islands. Whether you want it or not, the city is constantly packed. Locals started to complain that things such as getting a table at a restaurant or crossing an important square, such as Piazza San Marco, would take hours. Not to mention that instead of normal car traffic, well, in Venice you can experience some gondola traffic. But that's not even the worst that's been happening. As the number of tourists per year started to rise exponentially, so did the infrastructure to accommodate all these people. When landlords understood that they could make more money off of tourists than they could with locals, overall prices started to soar. That's why from the 1950s onward, fewer Venetians were able to continue living in the city's historical center. Landlords decided to more than double the prices of housing. So, a family that paid around 800 euros for their apartment now had to pay something around 1,500 euros to stay in the same place. And social services couldn't even do anything about it because there were so many similar cases happening all over the historical center. This may sound like something small, but when you stop to look at the big picture, it's changing the social fabric of the city. Yep, that's what usually happens in super touristy places. France is having to deal with a similar problem of over-tourism. France's Ministry of Tourism has concluded that tourists are spending less money, yet over-exploiting the classic tourist landmarks. Cities are made up of much more than just buildings and infrastructure. As urban sociologist Georg Simmel said, cities need to be heterogeneous, and by raising the prices of rent so much, the first ones to be kicked out of the city were the younger generations. After that, only well-established elderly people could afford to stay in the city center. Things started getting so out of hand in Venice's historical center that UNESCO itself threatened to put the city on its list of heritage sites in danger of severe damage. That's tough, huh? The city is still trying to find ways to mitigate the effects of tourism. The first thing they did was to ban those huge cruise ships from stopping in the city's historical area. Oh, and the city produced a tourism fee. Normally, anyone sleeping in the historical center already pays a fee. But nowadays, tourists have to register their entry and pay a daily fee for exploring the main island. The profits from this fee are directed toward making life in Venice's city center more affordable. Hopefully these policies will allow Venetians to move back to Venice's city center. Ciao!